p.m. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Weinstein.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Andrews.
Here.
Commissioner Douther.
Present.
Mayor Black.
Present. Next on the agenda, we've got public comment. Public comment is limited to anything that's not on the agenda this evening or this afternoon. If you have public comment, please speak directly into the mic and state your name and address. And please remember to be civil, kind, and respectful. Does anyone wish to speak? Well, my speech was wasted then. Public comment is now closed. First item is amendment to special events ordinance. Director Hatch.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Pursuant to our last conversation on January 29th, I've made the final changes that we discussed in that meeting to the, well, hopefully the final changes to the special events ordinance to get us updated where we are comfortable with. Within your packet, we have the 7 or so pages that are listed with red line markings through them. Again, we've covered most of this. I'll review really quick a few of the more important items that we touched on. And then if you guys have any questions, please let me know and I can address those. First off, the special event general term, we changed that to 3 distinct items that made it a little more specific and easier to understand. The paragraphs above had been in place for a while and kind of left for a few loopholes, but the biggest thing within that is any temporary activity or fee waiver which requires approval by the city manager or the commission. That's the main, that's on page 4, sorry if you guys are flipping through, 4 of 75 in your packet. It's item number 3, it's any temporary activity or fee waiver which may require the approval of the city manager or the commission. That was our big sticking point as far as additional definitions to the special events. And on top of that, any sort of fee waiver that it falls above the city manager's threshold that we discussed previously and has also been added would kick the application to the Board of Commissioners for their approval. Otherwise, we feel it's well defined enough that staff can handle it and get all the clearances and information to the public and make sure that the event's done properly. If we go into, let's see, page 5, we updated on item number 3, 42-19, item 3. Necessary emergency services are required to be contracted with the Madeira Beach Fire Department at the billing rates set forth by the fee schedule. And then Pinellas County Sheriff's Department is required to be on site for the duration of all events involving alcohol. That has been something that we've essentially always done. We've just memorialized it here. So there's not any confusion on outside security or any other concerns related to that. Pinellas County Sheriff's Department is our preferred vendor with that, as we do have 2 of them on our staff, and they are familiar with the site and the properties that we hold special events. Again, on page 6, we added just more language related to the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, city manager and DOT approval for another special event permit condition. Going to page 7, the last addition that was asked for at that meeting, if you go to section 42-22, item number 3, the city manager may waive special event fees upon his or her determination up to an amount no greater than $500 without Board of Commissioner approval. So that was what we discussed at the last meeting. And essentially, a great example of this, a lot of the confusion that I guess all in all, the ordinance wants to throw a cast net on all the events and activities within the city. We do have an event that occurs every year. The VFW does a poppy drive in Johns Pass. And basically they set up a table somewhere along the boardwalk and they sit there with volunteers throughout the weekend, 3 days of Veterans Day, and they hand out their poppy little flower things. They've always come to the city. They've always discussed it with us. Previously, there wasn't necessarily, we just kind of, as long as the communication was there, it was an event that we allowed to happen. With strict enforcement of this, you could lean toward that being a special event, and it would require us to put them through an extensive process further than just a phone call to say that they're going to be there. To me, through the determination of this, it's not necessarily a special event. And we have a lot of, if somebody's selling Girl Scout cookies outside of Publix, then we would be doing the same thing. To be quite frank, we appreciate the communication with that organization, but it's not necessarily city business that we need to be involved in and bother them with. So as long as we're able to determine through the use of this that something like that is not necessarily needs to go through the process, and they just, as long as we keep those good relationships, we don't necessarily need them to go through this. So I just want to make sure that that's something that seems clear through our conversations with this. But all in all, that's really the extent of the changes. The application was updated, and there weren't too many additions to that through our conversations, so it remained essentially the same since last time. So if you guys have any questions, I'd gladly field those.
Hey, Jay. I'm not even sure this question's for you. I do have a question. On page 7 of 75 here, I'm having a tough time getting my arms around this pro forma financial report. And I know, look, I've been in the finance world before, and I know that it's not the easiest thing in the world to read, so I don't know who on the board can read one, but I guess my question to my fellow commissioners is, what are we exactly looking for here? I mean, if there was an extra fee, if somebody made more money than they said they were going to make, or anything along the lines of that, I'm trying to get my arms around what we're really looking for here. Because if there's something that we're looking for, this will make it a lot easier for me. Because the way I read it, it's kind of silly that we'd be asking for this, because I thought, and Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, I think your title's still Parks, Rec, and Special Events Director, correct?
Officially, I believe so.
Okay, yeah, I mean, but I don't think it's probably changed, but, and your job is to promote and attract events. And if you're asking people for their financials for an event, I mean, we should want them to make as much money as they possibly can. I mean, that's kind of why, and to drive good events to the city, if we're gonna sit there and stickle over what their financials look like. I mean, and I'm not trying to be a pain in the butt here. I just really kind of want a reason why we would ask somebody for this kind of information. It doesn't seem right.
Well, may I make a comment? Okay. I would just like to say that I think that the pro forma, I think that represents good faith on all parts. I think that any event coordinator wants to show us that they have the means and the stability behind them to have an event here. So I definitely think that we've had it for many years, probably, and I think that it's definitely warranted. Thank you.
What have we had for many years? We haven't asked anybody for any kind of financial reports until recently. Well, I'd like to just comment and then I'll hush, but I would like to say that, yes, we have certainly asked in the past. Very often we maybe have not received it, and I think that's been the negligence of the city to have not, gotten the information that we should have with regards to activities. Correct. What are we looking for? I understand what you're saying, but what are we looking for? What specific thing are we looking for of where they're spending their money, I mean, we've got an event, and I know we'll talk about Seafood Festival here in a bit. They've been here for 37 years. We can't trust that they're keeping the books okay? I mean, it's none of our business how they keep their books. They got to report to the IRS, or for a nonprofit, they don't. But what are we looking for? What, as a board, are we going to approve or not approve as far as a special event going forward? Maybe for a new event, see if they have the financial backing behind them. I get that. I just don't understand why existing events, we'd be asking them for any financial information. I mean, they've been doing these events here for years. Why are we looking at their financials? Nobody on this board is a financial expert. I just want to know what we are looking for.
I would just like to say, as a commissioner, and then you can carry on, but as a commissioner, we have a public trust, and I think that we require for our obligations to our citizens, to our business people. I think that's part of it. I think a pro forma, I think we're not looking to find something, and I'll turn it over to you, but I'm just saying, as a public servant, it's very important that we have an obligation to our stakeholders, our citizens, to provide them with the best information that we know about any event that's going to happen. Thanks.
And I think that if we're going to do it for the first time we have an event, we shouldn't be lax and say, well, next time we'll just trust you. I mean, if we're going to do it for one event, you have to do it for all events.
To clarify really quick, before this goes any further, in that section, this is that pro forma slash P&L statement applies to any event that seeks a waiver of fees. We're not asking for every event because, I mean, it's just, it's a conversation we don't have every time. If somebody's asking for a waiver of fees, then I guess the conversation is we're kind of saying why, if that was within that paragraph.
Right, and I get exactly what everybody's saying. I just don't know what we're looking for. I don't know what is going to be put on a pro forma statement that's going to be telling us, oh, that's an event we should have or we shouldn't have. I just, that's where I'm having a tough time with it, and I think it's going to be difficult for us to draw bigger events in here or different types of events in here if we are that nosy into their business. If they've run events before here and they've been successful and we know who they are, I just don't know if that's any of our business. That just doesn't, it seems like we're digging a little too deep. Just my opinion, that's all.
I believe that if they're, like you said, if they're asking us to waive fees, then, I think that we have the responsibility to the taxpayers to say, okay, we're waiving it because here's what the costs were and stuff like that. And I think that's what the pro forma shows us, is what their cost is, what they're making or not making, versus, saying, oh, okay. So that's kind of the way I look at it. If someone is making X amount of dollars and they say, well, I want you to waive the fees for this, but you're making all this money, why? And I think this is what it shows us.
If I might add, something that we could add to this, and I think some good questions and good points here, kind of leads me to this, and because the Seafood Festival as well as King of the Beach, the two events that we essentially waive fees for, within the P&L statement, we've gotten some sort of, what am I trying to say? The impact, the economic impact numbers. And if I were to try to specify what exactly we're looking for, I think to me it's those numbers. For us to be able to say, hey, we may have waived X amount of money, but the financial impact or the economic impact to the city of this event is this other number. So I think maybe if I define that a little further, I mean, if that's what we're trying to define it as, or set forth what exactly we're looking for, because that might justify,
Yeah, that makes more sense. I mean, you're not going to find that in a pro forma, but I mean, something, an economic impact statement would be terrific. That would give me anything I would need. I mean, like I said, just my opinion. Jay, my other question to you was, is that $250 fee for large events, is that new? Or is that something that's been on here before? I always thought it was just a $100 fee just to process the event.
That was an updated. We did that on the staff end. The special events process has gotten, for example, if we were to permit the Poppy Drive, that to me is maybe an hour of time to sit there and go through the process and everything. For larger events such as Seafood Fest, King of the Beach, we are going to a lot of meetings. We're going to a lot of other things, and the packet is a much larger bit of information due to the requirements of the contract and everything else. So to us, it's a larger processing fee for that. We just increased it a little bit to maybe cover costs a little more. And at the same time, too, we get a lot of, we're going to have a concert there. We want to reserve this date. And then we go 4 or 6 weeks down the road, and then they just call us up and go, never mind. So we just, for the trouble and knowing that we're going to have to shut down certain things or whatever to reserve facilities, we put that in there, and it's not necessarily a deterrent, but it can make people a little more serious about what they're applying for event-wise.
Thank you.
I have a question about the same item. Would it be better to break it down? Now it's small and large events. Would it be better to break it down small, medium, and large, add medium, and you could add another level of cost there?
We can. I'd have to look into a little bit more. We picked that benchmark because there's, quite a bit changes between 1,000, below 1,000 and above 1,000. If we got into that, it's just another ballpark that we'd have to kind of fit in an event into. But
And is there a maximum, or I guess it depends on where they're
Fire
Gonna
code,
be-
essentially.
Okay.
And it's dependent of every, this room versus the
Right.
field, so.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I have one more question. On page 4 of 75, the second paragraph from the top, basically the last sentence where it says solely, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. The last red paragraph, where it starts off, it shall be the authority, and then third line down, it says, for the activity will be accepted or required and/or required. It sounds like it's too many requirements.
Oh, that's an extra word. It should
Okay.
just be and/or required. I'll take
Okay.
that out of there.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
And I was quite comfortable, Mayor, with all the work that the permitting, that the special events permitting review got. And we've gone through it many times, and we did take the old, I still have copies of using an older copy of the ordinance, okay, that was done a long, long time ago, and basically working it over. And we have had many meetings on it, so I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, any more discussion? Thank you, Director Hatch.
Thank you.
Next, we have the amendments to the fee ordinance. Director Portal.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's that time of year. Annually, we should review our fees to make sure that all of our programs are functioning in a fiscally responsible manner. And so we have, the staff has gone back into their various areas and reviewed what the impact for provision of various services are. And each of the department heads are available today to go over their section. We wanted to ask because Mr. DeSantis is so very essential to the one day we have left to meeting our FEMA requirements that we're going to ask if you have any questions about the building division section, that we address that first. And that would be starting on page, I think you're looking at page 10, S on the top, building permit fees and schedules. And I believe the only change he was making was in regards to the 2.5% surcharge on the permits under number 3, parent 3, about 2/3 of the way down the page there.
Sorry, what page?
Page 10 of 31.
Okay,
2475.
got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're looking at a different version. I apologize for that. Are there any questions in regards to the building section?
I don't think so.
All right, then we will let Mr. Santos go forth and fix stuff. That's what he's doing for us. And then we can return to the beginning of the document, and the first section up is the clerk's office. And you'll see there are a whole lot of underlining there because she's trying to make sure that all the appropriate public notice items are addressed there, and I'll let her address that section.
The changes I made here, instead of just having what the cost is for a one-sided copy, two-sided copy, certified copy, or notary public fee, I included language to state what is a public record and what does a public record include, and what the statute states about right of access to public records under reasonable conditions, and what it means for extensive requests pursuant to the Florida statutes, and the inspecting fees, all of which are quoted in the statutes. And so I did a synopsis of each for the fee ordinance to explain it. Ms. Linda.
Any discussion from the board? All right, thank you.
All right. The next section up is the Development Services section, listed as Article 2.
I just reviewed that.
It's Development Services, that'll be the planning, and that's the next section up. And can you tell me what page you have for that?
It's the page numbers down here.
19, page 19.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have apparently printed out the planning version, the original version, and I don't have all the same page numbers. I apologize for that. So it's page 19. The changes that were proposed in this section, we may not need to go forward with. The purpose in these changes was actually to capture some of the real cost associated with the use of the magistrate. And the magistrate hears some appeals, but also hears variances and special exceptions. And those have been costing the city a lot of money. Every time the magistrate comes over, it's a minimum of $800 just for his time. And then he or she also has to review a lot of documents and prepare special orders at the end of every action. And we pay for all of that time as well. Then there's also the staff's requirement to prepare findings, and that takes quite a bit of time and analysis. So I had gone back through all of the special exception and all the variants over the last couple of years and averaged out what the cost was for each of those. And as you can see, it's significantly higher than what we were collecting. Now, given the recent charter attempt to amend the charter in order to replace the Board of Adjustment with the special magistrate, and the failure of that attempt, the charter says that the commission may appoint a Board of Adjustment to hear special exceptions and variances. It doesn't say that you have to, and it doesn't say you can't use a special magistrate, but given the voters have kind of weighed in on the issue of using a special magistrate as opposed to a Board of Adjustment, you may want to consider creating that Board of Adjustment, in which case it would cost us less to go through the process, and we could back up to the existing fee structure.
Linda, could
Yes.
you just verify one for me? It's A5, the cost on it? That's
Yes.
quite a jump.
It is, because that's an after effect. That's when somebody's gone ahead and they've built or changed their land contrary to code, and then comes in and asks for a variance. And typically, our code right now says that when you do that sort of thing, you pay 5 times the fees. Wow. But I didn't want to use 5 because that was just so monstrously
Because you
high.
had double on there, and I
So
just wondered, you know.
So I just doubled it. But again, these, now for appeals and after the fact variances, all those would have to be dealt with if you create it with the Board of Adjustment instead of the magistrate. And then the cost would be lower because we would not be paying a legal trained arbitrator or judge for the services.
Thank you.
I would suggest that that still be doubled, at least whatever it is we charge there. If it's going to be a $600 fee, that it be doubled for an after-the-fact variance, because quite frankly, a lot of people actually just go ahead and change things, figuring, well, it's easier to get permission or forgiveness than permission. And in the case of a variance, it could create a significant legal quandary for the city and set us up for a lot of legal challenge. So it's important for us to discourage that.
Linda, I think that it's definitely warranted that we have raised those fees. I think years and years ago, when we did have a Board of Adjustment, and we did have it for many years, and that, of course, was voluntary, citizens participating in that Board of Adjustment. But I think that nobody has ever just looked at those fees to realize the time that you have to put in to do that. And probably it's not at all overbuilt up, going from 600 to 1730. Yes, it does sound like a huge amount, but when was it 600? In 1981?
Yep, in all likelihood.
So, right.
And-
So I think it's warranted as well.
And some of what's happened is that these kind of actions weren't conducted as quasi-judicial proceedings in the past. It requires a lot more formal process and training for any decision maker. If it's a magistrate, we don't have to provide that training, but we certainly pay for the credentials in their hourly time. If we have a board, we're going to have to make an ongoing effort to ensure that they remain trained and act in accordance in the limits of their authority and in the process as required by law. So it is more difficult for a lay board to conduct a quasi-judicial hearing. It does take more time. We put more staff time into it, obviously, because we have to constantly be training and assisting them through a process. But that will be something the commission will have to discuss and decide how they're moving forward. We've been looking into it. If you do go to a Board of Adjustment, we have some suggestions on how that be done. It's very difficult in a small community to keep coming up with boards with credentials in, real specific legal-based areas. We have some suggestions. But at any rate, if you go over 2 more pages, there's an additional, there's a section here that deals with administrative waiver and encroachment extensions. You may recall that within the last 18 months or so, I brought you a change in the ordinance that allows people who have encroachments into the setback to extend along the line of that encroachment as long as they don't go further into the setback, because we have actually neighborhoods where there are no houses that aren't encroaching. And so people were unable to make any changes to their homes or improvements at all. And so you did approve that, and that's been working pretty well, but we had no fee for it. So we had to add that fee in. That's a pretty involved process because it does go to a hearing. It also requires our working with the neighbors and doing a drainage plan. So we've added all the staff hours that are required for those encroachments into that fee proposal. The administrative waiver is something that allows the staff to look at waivers to the setbacks up to 15%, but you have to meet pretty much the same kind of criteria you do for a variance. So we have to not only review it, but we have to write up an opinion, a professional opinion, and findings of fact for each of those.
Director Portal, under that administrative waiver, you've got an asterisk by it, and either I'm just totally missing something, but I've looked for where that asterisk refers to for a while, and I can't find it. So what does it refer to?
I wish I knew. Actually, I think that's probably left over, and we'll remove that.
Okay, so it doesn't refer.
No.
So okay, thank you.
If there are no other questions about the development services section, we can move on. We've already addressed building. And so I think that financial department is next.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, the only other change that we're recommending from the previous time that you reviewed this is on page 27 of 75, or of the actual fee schedule, page 13 of 31. Up at the top, regarding the weekly, the passes for a weekly, which is $25, and monthly, the pass is, and this is for parking, and $75. When, back in June timeframe, when we first changed the fee schedule and when we changed the parking fee from $2 to $2.50, we also changed the weekly pass from 20 to 25 with a little bit of an increase, and the monthly as well. And looking at this, and then talking to the parking staff and talking to the people up front that deal with the public when they get this, we just feel like we didn't increase this enough or sufficiently to cover our costs. So we're now recommending to increase that from 25 to 30, and then from 75 to 80.
75 to what?
75 to 80 for the monthly, and the weekly from 25 to 30.
Walt, that's still too low, man. I'd bump it to 50. I mean, people, you know, in these condos, when they have two cars that come here, heck, man, I think you could do 50 and 100 without even blinking an eye. I mean, a monthly, you know, you're taking up a spot.
Well, you'd make him a parking supervisor happy because he wanted to go a lot more, he wanted to increase this more significantly than I did. I talked to the people up front, and I was trying to get a more compromised figure. I didn't want to increase it too much, but I just felt it was just too low.
You know, you could have a seasonal and non-seasonal rate, but I mean, you could raise this, you could double both of them easy without even blinking an eye.
I'll welcome a consensus if you want to increase this further.
I would be okay with 30 to 80.
I want to ask one question.
Yes.
Are we able to go ahead and approve what we've got so we can start charging these things, and then at a future date, increase it again? I mean, have we approved this to the point, if we approve these rates to the point where we can charge them now, or are we just going to keep, can you answer that, Director Portal?
The items that, Madam Mayor, if I may, the items that are new additions have to be ratified by ordinance. The items that are not underlined are fees that are already in place that we are already charging. So that's something that we just need to be mindful of because it requires 2 readings to adopt the ordinance.
Right, okay, that's why I wanted to go ahead and adopt the ordinance, okay, and start charging those fees and then keep, bringing it up at another time, or else we'll never get these fees into,
Our hope,
never have them accepted.
Madam Mayor, our hope is that we are able to get consensus from the board on the items that are presented to you this afternoon, and then bring it for first reading at your first meeting in April, and then final adoption at your first meeting in May. Unfortunately, we have a certain amount of time that is required per the charter for the adoption of an ordinance. So we have some things in place procedurally that we can't move forward on, but that's something that we can certainly get in place after the first meeting in May.
Right, and that's why, Madam Mayor, that's why I would like to go ahead and do the first reading, or approve for the first reading of the ordinances as they stand right now, go to the second reading in May, because we've been discussing this since last June, I think. We have.
Yes, the first fee ordinance was adopted in June.
Okay, and so I just think that it's more prudent to approve the increases and the changes now and go for a second reading, and certainly, yes, bring it back, okay? If Commissioner Andrews feels, that weekly rates or whatever, and other commissioners might think other things. I just think that we're more prudent to go ahead and accept what we've got as written and as compiled by Linda Portal now at this
Well,
meeting.
we're not really accepting or declining it. We're going to have a consensus whether or not to go forward to the next meeting. where we'll
Okay, to
vote on
approve
it.
these fees, okay. And that's the way I feel, yeah.
Debbie, what are you saying?
So it's not going to take any more time.
The 25, the 30, the 50 that Doug brought up?
I'm saying that we should accept, we should have what we've got here now, okay, and not discuss any more about what the increases might require, but go ahead
Mr.
and.
Pierce brought up that he would like to raise it from 25 to 30, and from 75 to 80. So what do you, I don't understand, are you saying keep it at 25, make it to 30, or make it to 50?
No, I'm
Like
saying
that?
leave it at 25 and 75, because if we now continue, if we go up to 30 and 80, or if we go up to whatever, on whatever category, okay, we also have to wait, am I correct? We have to,
No.
No, you still would
Oh,
charge
okay,
the fees
okay.
that are already in
I'm just-
place, yes.
okay,
The new fees won't take effect until the second and final reading of the
okay,
ordinance.
I misunderstood, sorry.
So what are you saying then, for what dollar?
I'm comfortable with the way they are now, okay, but I'm not opposed to increasing if there's good enough reason that they need to be, as Director Pierce said, that, you know, he was thinking of going from the 25 to the 30 and the
Yeah,
monthly
just-
from 75 to 80. I have no problem with
Yeah,
that.
just one
I
more
just didn't want it
time.
to hold up the,
Back in June, when we increased the parking fees from $2 to $2.50, we increased both these by $5, and that, I just feel like it wasn't enough of an increase. And since then, that's what I'm hearing from staff. So I tried to listen to everybody's point of view on this, and I didn't want to have a whole lot of pain on this, but I just felt another $5 increase in each one of these categories would be sufficient.
You know, I kind of think that the 30 that Walt brought up and the 50 that Doug brought up, and I'd be happy splitting that and making it 40 and 90, my personal opinion.
Good by me.
So 40 for the weekly and 90 for the
Consensus
monthly?
for 40 and 90?
Yep.
Consensus from the board
I
on
think
that?
that's fine. And Doug, are you okay?
Perfect, thanks.
We have
Yes.
consensus.
Madam Mayor, if I may, speaking to the parking issue, one of the things that will be discussed later on, and I think is germane to the conversation that we're having now, is if the Board of Commissioners wanted to insert a fee for festival parking. Right now, as it stands, with the arrangements that we've had in place with regards to events and programs, all we have done is charge the $2 or $2.25 per hour, and I wanted to see if the board had the appetite to effectively, if it is a festival or event or what have you, that we can levy a fee associated with that, whether that's $10 or $20 or $30, whatever the pleasure of the board is, but right now, we don't have the mechanism in place in the fee ordinance, so staff is asking for direction as to how the board wishes to proceed on that.
I like going to the $20 per car. It's a very standard kind of fee. It's been used all over our city by private vendors, and I think it would be a good thing for the city to start at $20 for special events.
I agree with you, except for the fact that I think we're walking down a really slippery slope, and I speak to you on experience on this, because the one thing that we tried to do, I remember, we had these concerts before, and people tried to get us to co-sponsor events and things along the line of this, and they wanted us to, they offered us even the opportunity to sell beer, but they wanted, we could put a big City of Madeira Beach flag up and sell beer, but they wanted to sell beer at $9 a shot. Jay is probably laughing when we talk, because we had these conversations, and there was no way I could look at a resident and sell them a $1.50 beer for $9. I couldn't do that during an event. I think the other problem we're going to have with parking is, and we did this, fortunately, we got ourselves kind of away from, we benefited from it, but I don't really love the idea of the city holding up their flag and saying that we are involved in parking. I know we're not talking about this yet, and maybe, Jay, you have an idea as far as what we're going to do for Seafood Festival, but if we are charging, what are we going to do to a resident that drives up and says, I have a parking pass. Why, this is on my agreement with the city that I can park here for free, and now you're gonna charge me $20. And trust me, the calls will come in, because we got the calls even though we weren't the direct person taking the money from people when they were parking in the Winn-Dixie lot for $20. Just something I think we gotta discuss, because we gotta get ahead of it, because it will definitely come up, especially for Seafood Festival. And like I said, I think we're jumping ahead because I don't know what the parking plan is yet for Seafood Festival. I don't know if we have a private vendor that's doing it and we're splitting, or we're gonna put city employees out there and they're gonna collect $20. If that's the case, we're gonna take some heat on it, okay? That's just my 2 cents.
I kind of agree in the aspect of, I think if they have a parking pass, that we should not be charging them, If they're from city X, Y, or Z, then that's a different story. If they're a guest coming here, yes, I think, that we charge them, and if it's $20 or whatever the amount we decide on, but I think if it's a resident with a parking pass, but then you run into the problem, next year, how do you do that when we don't have parking passes anymore? So I don't have a good answer, because they were talking about doing away with the parking passes next year. So is somebody going to be at each parking lot with the gun to see if that person's in the system? So I don't know.
John, do we have a plan in place for parking for Seafood Festival yet?
One of the things that we're talking about as it relates to the Seafood Festival is the city being the entity that controls parking. And conceivably, we were talking about the fee of about $20 per spot for the event. And the way in which we structured it, that anyone who accesses that lot would effectively have to pay the $20. Because most cities that move forward with an event fee, as you're well aware of, they don't delineate the difference between a resident and a visitor, because it's a administrative challenge to say, okay, this person's in, this person's not in, those types of things. It's usually all or nothing. So the recommendation that we would have in the event that we wanted to go forward with festival parking is that it's either we decide to charge for the parking of that area, or we choose not and have them feed the meter like they've done in the past, because it would be an administrative issue for staff to verify that those in fact are valid parking passes, et cetera.
Well, like I said, I felt this pain, and Jay knows what I'm talking about. We felt this pain before, because we did it for the carnival, we did it for some of the concerts, and even though our name wasn't on it, we still got a lot of calls on it. What I would suggest, only because we use an outside company and we split revenues with them. It does cut into our profit, but it's a lot easier to explain to somebody, hey, we weren't the parking entity behind it. They had their own booth set up, they had their own, and we don't really have, although it seems very easy to park cars, we don't really have professionals trained in it, right? We don't have a lot of people here. We could offer, we got companies that can offer valet service. Jay, can Jay come up and talk? I think he probably has something probably pretty instructive to say here.
Sorry. Something else with this, looking at whatever amount we end up going with, there's also a section within the ordinances that match up to certain holidays where we allow for residents to pay for parking as well, or to not pay for parking, but charge parking at their homes. I think this, one of the benefits that we've looked at with this festival parking is allowing for us to essentially be charging the same rate that we are for that. I forget the name of the condo that's directly across from John's Pass, but for the Seafood Festival, I paid $20 right across the street next to a city lot, because it was the most convenient thing I could find when we went. So again, this would provide the opportunity for us to charge for that, but we do face plenty of challenges. I think once we get a plan together, once we've had the discussion on Seafood Fest and get a plan together, we can come up with something that is clear and concise in regards to that. The parking opportunities for residents is a good thing, especially when we're looking at these events. When it boils down to revenue versus our relationship with our residents, we know the obvious answer every time. So I think that, again, this is something that we'll have to look through a little bit further, but providing us the flexibility within the fee schedule is the key here, to be able to charge that versus when we get to it, we just kind of are stuck in a situation where we can't do either. So we just want to make sure, because, when we turn it over to, or, when they have valet parking for special events and this and that, they can charge whatever they like, but it provides, if we're going to be the co-sponsor or we're involved in any way whatsoever, we've got to at least have the guidelines to see forth how we're going to do it. So if it's an amount, or maybe it's an allowance to set an amount within our own guidelines, some sort of flexibility, either way, I think it's definitely got to be in there so we can make that.
And to Director Hatch's point, having the flexibility, even if we don't put a numeric value to parking and say that the city or the city manager has the authority for special events or festivals to levy a fee associated with the cost of providing service or enter into an agreement with an entity to provide that, at least it gives us the flexibility. As it stands right now, we have no mechanism. So if we had a large-scale special event and you wanted to turn all your parking lots to, $20 per lot, you don't have the mechanism in place to do that, and you would only be able to charge the $2.50 per hour. So this provides something else. So we can, if it's the board's pleasure not necessarily to have an amount in there and provide for that flexibility, we can come up with some language and bring it back to you on first reading, and you can make some tweaks and modifications to it if that's the pleasure of the board.
I think that's a good idea, to come back. I think that there is a need for the special event parking or special festival parking, but I don't know what the answer is. But I like the idea, and a lot of other cities have it. And I don't know if we have checked into some of those other cities, but they do charge for the resident. They charge residents, everybody gets charged. I think they do that in St. Petersburg and in Gulfport. You might want to check, but yeah, I'm for the wording. I think there's a place for it to be in here for the future. So I'm part of that consensus if y'all want to.
Well, I'm okay with having a special event fee, but I think residents should be able to park for free. They've been able to park for free for a long time, and they're not going to be very happy when we say, now you have to pay $20.
I'm okay if you guys want to put some language together with that. Coming up with a fee today is probably not the right idea. I'm going to get caught up in the public entity versus the private entity parking. That's where it's going to really be an issue for me. But, doesn't mean I can't be convinced. I just think it's probably, Maggie hit it right on the head, and John mentioned it as well. I think we're really going to have an issue with some residents that are going to pull into John's Pass Park during Seafood Festival, see a big Madeira Beach banner and say, oh, okay, so it's just parking is normal. And I think that's the issue that we're going to have. So that's just my point of view.
All right, the next section is the fire department. You're looking at page 28.
Mayor, Commissioners, this is just an extension of our already existing fee structure for the fire department to make us a little bit more consistent with some of our surrounding departments and help us to recoup some of the cost with some of the larger developments that are going into our community.
And I will say that, remember, we have just recently created a site plan review process. It was really loose before, although there were requirements, we didn't have a public hearing process. So there's kind of an added level of participation required by all the departments to go through that process. And we have been bringing the fire department in regularly on the reviews in more than one level. They have to review the plan several times over by the time we get a complete set in from just about any developer.
I personally have no questions on this department. So, anybody have no comments?
Right, the next section.
Thank you, Chief.
Next section is Parks and Rec, and Jay gets to come back up. And that begins on page 29.
Hello again. There's a good handful of changes. Some of the stuff remained the same. If we go on page 29, item number 3, youth sports. We've taken a look at this, and based on the length of the season, the type of sport, the necessary equipment, essentially, we decided that it'd probably be best for us to put the rate determined by the sport, competitive analysis with neighboring communities, and a cost recovery item. That said, we'd be able to take a look at our referee cost, our uniform cost, the field time, electricity, all that stuff, staffing, and then work backwards and build a rate to ensure that we would cover our costs as far as each sport. And equally, we would honor the resident, non-resident pricing model the same way that we do. So for example, like soccer would be $60 for residents, $75 for non-residents, and would cover all of the essential costs for the season. The 10% sibling discount is something else that, again, on a competitive rate, is something that we look at when kids have families of families have 3 or 4 kids. That 10% goes a long way in goodwill and getting people out here. And if you guys have any questions along the way, you can stop me or you can wait till the end. It's up to you. Going to page 16, the after-school program. And this is with conversation about the marina. This is actually something that most recently our auditor reminded us. This is the pricing model that we had been going with. There's a resident rate of $8, a non-resident rate of $11, and we've been providing a sibling discount each day of $3. The reason that we don't do a percentage there is the percentage, one, would get us into dollar and cents and odd numbers and all that. So for the sake of human error and making sure that we get all this correctly, we kept it at that rate. And then the city employee daily amount is the recent discussion that we've had, as well as with the fire contract.
Jay, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
'Cause I didn't know it. What is this middle school up here? What are they charging?
It's the same rate.
Same rate that we're charging?
Oh no, yeah, that's our program. That's the same.
Okay, because they have a summer program up there now and everything else. I just saw on the board as I was driving by. They have a summer program and after-school program at the school.
Oh, I'm sorry. The school. The school is actually it's a YMCA program, so they have they have certain scholarships and certain discounts that it's a lot further in depth. It's based on your personal income and all this other stuff. It's a determination that's specific per family. We don't go that far. We just charge these rates. We're similar, but if under certain circumstances, they can get discounts below that too. But we get a most of our kids now have jumped from that program to ours because the prices, maybe it's a little bit more for us, but it's with the offerings that our program has and the structure and everything that we offer is a step above.
Jay, I wanted to ask you a question on this also. This past year when we were talking about the fire department and the firefighters, if they had children, that they were not going to be charged for the care for the children at the center there. What about the city employees? I know we probably don't have a lot of them with children of age to go to an after-school program, but isn't there any type of benefit for the city employees themselves for this here child care?
Actually, I believe that's my mistake looking at this. It says city employees charge for after school and summer. I know that one of them was decided on.
The after-school care has been changed per the direction provided by the board to be free. That summer camp is the only fee that would have to be paid by fire personnel or the general employees. But the board did request or provided legislative direction to staff to change the after-school care to be free of cost.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's incorrect on 4C, where it says city employee daily is $8, it's 0?
Yes, that was
Okay.
my error in
Cool.
doing some final changes.
Jay, so we have no discount for summer camp currently?
Well, I'll get to that next section.
Okay, sorry.
So rolling down on page 30, number 5 is summer camp program. The session rates have stayed the same. The city employee, which is item D down at the bottom, that is the resident rate. So that mirrors the kind of discussion we've had previously. And then item 6 and this is a formatting thing. The sibling discount applies to that. Previously, it was $50 and $100, depending on the session or the full summer. It's 10%, it equals the same thing. What we were doing is we were taking 50 or 100 off of 375, which was way more than 10%. So that's being adjusted to be an equal percentage across the board. Item number 8 there is the fitness center. Those were the rates that we've discussed previously. The resident rate of free, daily, monthly, yearly, and then a non-resident rate for $520 and for $200 yearly for passes, and then a visitor pass for $15 a week. And that's in place so that once we clear the few hurdles that we have with the direction of the fitness center, then we will be able to charge a rate.
Jay, what are the hurdles that we're looking? What are the hurdles that we're looking at with this?
The most recent conversation with that was with our insurance, the comfort level with the insurance company that covers us, and we have to essentially make a determination based on the risk,
Okay.
which direction we want to go.
And so, and I missed this, I apologize. You're going to have to staff it how many hours a day?
The most recent conversation we had, we were going to do morning hours, 4 hours in the morning, which would provide the opportunity for residents 7 to 11 or 8 to noon or whatever to do that, because during the morning hours, I don't want to say there's less going on, but there's not a group of 80 children in the recreation center that needs attention. I can put people in the fitness center in front of a computer and also check staff in, or not check staff in, but check the residents and non-residents in, as well as continue to do their work, their daily tasks, but also oversee the center itself for safety purposes and everything else. So 4 hours in the morning, Monday through Friday, would provide the opportunity for people to utilize that center, is the intent.
Okay. The other question is so I don't know of any other municipalities that let you go to the gym for free. And not that we need to compare ourselves to anybody else, but I don't look at that as being a high usage, high capacity gym. So of all the things on here, I am dead set against this. I don't think this is cost prohibitive at all. Just the idea to staff it, to ensure it, I just don't see it as being cost prohibitive. Maybe I stand alone on that, but that seems to be a really, really big chunk. And especially, like I said, I was on the campaign trail, and nobody even mentioned it. Everybody's already forgotten about it. Or they walk by it and they see how big of a gym it is, and they're like, oh, no big deal. So, I really don't think this is a great idea.
Moving on from there, we're on page 31. Yes. We talked, we talked about the rental rates previously. The big addition to this was if you go on to the first item, Monday through Thursday, item A, and then Roman numeral 7 there. The setup and breakdown fee, 2 hours before and 2 hours after. It's a $50 an hour fee. Essentially, we provided the opportunity for up to 2 hours and up to 2 hours before and after for residents, non-residents, based on the fee, to pay $50 an hour versus paying the full rental rate of that room. Understandably, the room is reserved, but essentially our only cost once the door is open is our staff time, which is the folks sitting there. There's not a party, there's not 100 people in the room. It's just provides them an opportunity, and competitively speaking, this market puts us in a better situation to market our facilities. It is a little bit lower cost, but I think that lower cost will bring an increased rental rate frequency of the building. So, and that goes into both the Monday through Thursday and for the Friday through Saturday. So, moving on to page 32, we have the Park Pavilion rentals. This was an email I believe you all received in relation to the sand volleyball court rental. It has not been changed in this. It was received in the past 48 hours. Something open for discussion. But there was a request that the sand volleyball court rental for 4 hours for residents be dropped to free. And in reviewing this, the financial impact of this is, I would say, not necessarily substantial enough to cause concern. I do think in fairness to serving the community, this is a great opportunity for residents who do want to get out there on the weekend. If they want to have first right of refusal, reserve the court for 4 hours. We'll just, we update the paperwork on the sign every week anyway, so this would be an opportunity for us to reserve this for them. We could keep the non-resident rate for that, so it's just, but for us, it's just something to offer them. We've got some local groups that like to meet up and play, and, paying $50 for 4 hours or, 25 for 2 hours or prorate or whatever, causes for kind of a financial constraint for folks that just want to enjoy something in the community. Oddly enough, this is not something that it's not rented that often, but in the first come, first serve capacity, if they want to do like a meetup or have a group that shows up every week, this would be a good opportunity for them. If you guys have any thoughts on that.
Madam Mayor, if I may, is the board in favor of the recommendation or the remarks communicated by the Recreation Director to be included in the actual ordinance?
Specifically to reduce or to eliminate the fee for the
Right.
volleyball
Correct.
for residents and just have them sign up and allow them to use it free on a first come, first served basis. That's what's been proposed.
I'm good.
I would go along with that.
That was just for a Sunday, right? It wasn't every
It's
day?
essentially any day.
Anytime?
Yeah.
Any day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do we have a consensus then?
Sure.
Yes. Okay.
It's easy. Okay, and then the last items, if you go to page 34 here, we kind of delve into the special events, and that's just reflecting some of the things we discussed about. First two items, the application fee for the small event, less than 1,000, 100, and then for larger than 1,000 is $250. The deposits remain the same. The fees for large event versus small events, essentially, and I guess I could have answered this earlier. Speaking large versus small event, I guess what I meant by large events is if it's in the park and it's shutting down all activities, that's a large event. If it's an event that's happening on Field 3, but we can still host t-ball and baseball and softball games here and not affect the community, or we can have something going on at the rec center, that's a smaller event. So it's really the impact of what's going on. The facility rental fee of $3,000 that essentially shuts down the whole place is kind of an all-inclusive fee. The small event fee, I put in a stage fee of $50 for residents, $100 for non. Field usage is $50 and $100 for residents and non. And then the facility fee, which mirrors the large event fees, is for ticketed events. So if they want to, and we strongly discourage this typically, while it'd be nice to collect $1.50 2,000 times, we don't want to exclude residents from events in the park. So if it happens, the discussion has happened to at least stop them from doing so, but it's something that happens occasionally. And then the last part's the alcohol management fee. And one note that I meant to put on this that I incidentally left out, this is for events that take place here at the City Center complex. If Daiquiri Shack wants to have a parking lot party and it's well on their property and they want to serve alcohol on their property following the correct ordinances, we can't step in and go, okay, well, you have to pay us a fee to serve alcohol on your property. It's not legal, I would assume. But this is, if you want to serve alcohol in the park, so this is the intent of this fee. And we've discussed this. Event 0 to 500 people is $250, and it scales up 500 to 1,500. And that's essentially for the review of the permitting and the process take place and everything that they're going to have going on.
Any discussion on that?
And Madam Mayor, if I may, Director Hatch, that is a one-time fee. It's not per day.
Correct.
Per event.
Any more questions of Director Hatch? Thank you, Director Hatch.
Commissioners, the next section is the Public Works.
Madam Mayor, members of the Board of Commissioners, I will be pinch hitting here for Public Works. If you can turn to page 42 of 75, but most of the changes are contained on the bottom of page 42 of 75 and then onto 43 of 75. Staff incorporated under item 16, item D and E, that would provide a Madeira Beach resident fuel discount. Currently, our residents do not benefit from a fuel discount. If they are a member of the entities that are listed below, or listed above, Boat USA or Tow USA, they get that discount, but they do not receive a discount associated with being a resident of Madeira Beach. So staff felt that it was appropriate to include that in the fee ordinance. Also, item E is an item that we discussed at our last Board of Commissioners meeting to allow for city co-sponsored events or community events, the opportunity for us to effectively provide for a discount on fuel sales. If you look on page 43, it specifies some of the events that are either City of Madeira events exclusively or events where we have contracts in place for the purposes of putting on special events. So staff is recommending inclusion of those events and to provide for the additional discounts for any city co-sponsor or community events, as well as giving the city manager the opportunity that in the event that we're approached by an entity that wants to establish an event, that we have the flexibility and the autonomy to offer the same type of discount, and obviously we'll inform the Board of Commissioners concerning that. Before I get into item 17 on that, that is the surveillance camera optional fee, I wanted to stand prepared to answer any questions the board may have on the additional discounts that we're recommending.
I have one question, Jonathan. One question. On the Madeira Beach resident, the 5 cents a gallon discount, how are you going to regulate that? Is it a bill, a driver's license?
One of the things that we're doing, we're in the process of modifying the existing lease agreements that are in place. And in the revised documents, there's going to be information that we're going to have a copy of driver's license that will be able to confirm addresses. It will be associated with their slip rental and those types of things. So we will have documentation in place and verification that effectively folks will be able to show that they are residents. We've also talked about the possibility of creating some type of card or some type of device that they could effectively present that verifies that, yes, in fact, they are a Madeira Beach resident.
Okay. I know it's a small sum of money, the 5 cents a gallon, or it seems, 5 cents, but you just want to make sure that somewhere down the line that you don't have someone who's using it this year and 5 years down the road or 3 years down the road, they're not living here and there's
That is correct.
taking advantage of that.
And that's one of the things that we're going to look into, is to make sure that every year, if we have a pass, that it changes colors or those types of things, so there's some verification process that has to occur.
This actually is just for the ability to use it should you want to use it. Okay.
Correct.
I just have two comments. One on page 43, number 2, it's actually King.
I saw the typo.
And just out of curiosity, on page 42, where from number 1 through 11, they've all changed like just a couple of cents. Is that to make it come out even, or?
Yeah, I think that's for the purposes of making it come out even, so
Okay.
for rounding and those types of things, yes. Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
correct.
Okay. All right.
And then item 17 is that we have currently moved forward with the acquisition of a new surveillance system, and included in the surveillance system that we do have, patrons have the opportunity for a fee that they can actually go onto their mobile device and watch their vessel or their RV or whatever they have parked at the marina. And this is something that the vendor that provides the service says that other communities have seen it in a situation where they've generated a couple of $100s a month. So we wanted the opportunity to possibly offer the same thing to the patrons of the marina. And if we can generate a couple $100 $1 a month or even $1,000 a month from people that subscribe to be able to jump on their mobile devices and see their vessels. We thought it would be a good benefit for us as a city and another way to generate revenue. So that's why we included that here in the fee ordinance.
I think that's a great idea. All right. Anybody have any more discussion on the fee ordinance?
Madam Mayor, also, one of the things that I will be bringing to the board for discussion at your next workshop is the Pinellas County is effectively increasing their tipping fees, the fees for dumping our sanitation waste. And so they've gone through a comprehensive study. Staff is going to be presenting the elements associated with the study, but we probably, through the budget process, are going to have some conversations about the fees that we levy for sanitation service because costs are going up. And then ultimately, again, another conversation about what we do with respect to recycling because we entered into a one-year contract and that contract is up for renewal or negotiations here around the holiday season. The other aspect in the fee ordinance that we need to place a section in, and Director Portell and I talked about this today, is the fees for impact, our impact fees. We're probably going to look to insert some type of language that once the study is complete, that those fees can take effect once the Board of Commissioners adopts that. So we'll work with the city attorney with respect to what type of language needs to be in the fee ordinance to allow for us, once the study is accepted by the Board of Commissioners, to move forward with the fee ordinance. So those are some other things that are outside of the existing ordinance, but it will come back to you in another form.
Thank you.
And you're referring to those, the study that's being done by University of Florida?
Florida, correct.
Okay.
I'm going to open the floor now for public comment on the special event and fees ordinance. Public comment is now closed on those items. Next item is the electric charging stations. Director Portell.
Right. The staff had received a referral some time ago from the commission to look at the issues surrounding electric charging stations, how many are available, how much they're used, what it would cost to install them, and also generally what, if there is any, is the standard for how many of those you need per population. Some of the concern had been about when we were reviewing things like garages, how many of the spaces inside the garage should be available for charging, and what kind of use would come of that. So the staff did some research, and I'd love to be able to show you the slideshow presentation, but you will note that the camera is not working. We tried everything we could think of earlier to get all the parts and pieces working, but ultimately the camera will not turn on. So I'm going to go over, I did provide you with a summary of some of the research that we have done to give you an idea of how many of the vehicles and how many stations are available. Generally speaking, throughout the state of Florida, it comes down to having one charging station for about every 12 electric vehicles, and on a statewide basis. And there are different types of charging stations. A level 1 charging station, in terms of installation cost, the cost for the station is somewhere between $300 and $1,500, and installation can be up to $3,000. Those are usually the stations you have hardwired into your home if you're going to have your own station or in your garage. Level 2 stations are the ones that you see most usually, and it's the type that we have out at the South Beach location, the Johns Pass Beach. That is a 240 volt, and it's recommended for multifamily or commercial installation. That type of station can charge up a car in 8 hours. The first one that I talked about would take 24 hours to do a full charge, and as I said, that was really based on 120 volts at your home. But the second one is 240 volts. It would be in a commercial location such as ours, and cost per station is anywhere from $400 to $6,500, and there's a really wide range there because of the type of station and how many outlets you have installed on it, because a lot of these stations have multiple charging outlets, so you can charge more than one car. In addition, the installation cost on that ranges anywhere from $600 to $12,000, and that's because depending on where you put it, you may have to trench into the ground or cut into asphalt or considerably alter public facilities or electric service to the area. So again, until you decide where you want the station, it's really hard to determine what the cost is going to be. We have the additional problem locally of making sure that anything we install out on the barrier islands meets the floodplain requirements for installation of new electric services. That would also add some cost to it. It'd make it obviously cheaper to put it in a garage than it is on the ground because there's no trenching involved, and you can work it into a garage design more efficiently. There is a third level of charging station that can charge a full charge in 30 minutes. It's the type that Tesla is putting in on a high-end commercial location. Some of them, they have some independent stations like that, mostly in California. And they use them or market them for also industrial level or fleets when you're charging up buses and things of that nature. Those per station are anywhere from $10,000 to $40,000, and their installation anywhere from $4,000 to $51,000. So typically you don't see public entities putting that type of station in, obviously. We did some survey to see what was available locally in the area generally. And then, as I said, throughout Florida, there are 1,100, just over 1,100 total charging stations in the state, and they provide almost 3,000 outlets. That provides for 34,352 electric vehicles in 2018 in the state of Florida, registered in the state of Florida. That doesn't necessarily include, of course, visitors. It's kind of hard to count that up. So Florida has one outlet available for every 11.57 electric vehicles. You obviously know where ours is located. I was going to show you on a map. There are also several located in other communities. And I'm going to see if I can. Okay, the city of Treasure Island has one station located at Publix. St. Pete Beach has 4 charging stations, 2 at City Halls, 1 at Walgreens, and 1 at the Kimpton Hotel Zamora. Gulfport has 2 stations. And South Pasadena has 1 station. So they're scattered around. There are quite a few of them in the older area of St. Petersburg. The city has been more involved in installing them in parking lots itself as a city expense, and have also been able to participate with the program by Duke Energy that it's a pilot program that they call Park and Plug. And what they're trying to do is test out the market to see how much demand there really is for charging stations, and doing that by providing them in areas where there's higher density population, and particularly where there's low income. We talk about the ability for people to charge their cars like in their garages, but not everybody has a garage. And the higher the intensity of the population and the lower the income, the less likely people actually have access to a garage to begin with. So Duke has been has been investing in getting more efficiency. They've got a fuel efficiency type program, and also trying to distribute these charging stations around areas like that. We can apply for that kind of assistance for our program, but then we're going to be evaluated based on how low income or how high intensity or density our population is. So it would be unlikely we could get on. We could get on a waiting list and see if we were determined an acceptable location for the program. It's in place until 2022. At that point, they'll assess how successful it's been and what kind of demand they've really had. And this is a critical issue because the only thing that we have to go on really for how well used the stations are checking out aerial photos. For instance, there are 15 aerial photos at various times for Treasure Islands. And out of those 15 photos, you can see that the charging station is being used twice out of 15 photos. In Madeira Beach, there are 11 aerial photos, satellite photos, and out of that, I think that it shows ours was being used twice out of the 11 times. So, but that's not by any means scientific because we don't have a day-by-day assessment of how often it's been used. We only know kind of snapshots over the course of the years. And finally, the other option for funding, and it's very much up in the air at this point, but you'll all remember that Volkswagen had to pay a hefty settlement in the United States for the fraud of intentionally programming its cars to operate very efficiently when it was being tested for emissions, but then to turn that function off for normal driving. And so they were producing many, many times the pollutants that they were being tested as in order that they could increase their efficiency in terms of miles per gallon. So under this settlement, they had to pay many, many millions of dollars to the federal government. And that settlement is broken up among the states that had the biggest impact. About a third of that settlement went to California. The other states all had to apply for it based on their impacts. Florida is one of the states with more charging stations than others. About half of all charging stations and a half of all vehicles, electrical vehicles, are in Texas, Florida, and California. So the rest is spread out pretty thin. So Florida was approved as a state that would receive some portion of that benefit, and now the state has to submit a plan for how they would use that money. It's hoped that some of that would be made available to local governments for grant programs in order to establish more electrical charging stations and other fuel efficiency oriented programs, but we don't know at this point how much money will be available and under what circumstances. So that's something that we're keeping track of, and I've got the city of Madeira Beach being notified anytime there's any movement in the state's program and their plans for distributing those funds. Other things that local governments can do is at least mention in policy, change your comp plan and say what your goal is and how many of these things you want to have, set a standard. I know that Commissioner Douther had suggested that, we need to have some kind of standard on what we're expecting people to put in for when they do develop an area. Again, anything that we put in would have to meet floodplain requirements in terms of installation. We would need, that's something we could do with impact fees. That's something that we could use the impact fees for in order to mitigate for transportation impacts. And it's also something that will take a little bit more research in terms of how many cars or vehicles we really have in the city. On an average, what type of vehicles those are, probably using the statewide standard. There's only about 2% of all vehicles are electric at this point. So we need a little more time to figure out how many vehicles we're talking about so we can apply the 2% and come back to you and say how many stations would this require. But we can put that sort of level of service into our comp plan. We can also put it in our codes to specify how we want things installed, if we do want these stations as part of development impacts, or even how we're going to install them as a city, to create a standard for how we want them placed and where. There has not, as I said, been a really large demand. There is a program that tries to keep track, lets people check in where they get their gas, or where they get their charges outside of their home. Most of the time, people are charging at home at this point. And so we don't have very many clicks on the use at our site. But again, that's not very scientific because not everybody has to check in. It's very difficult to know exactly what the level of service is at this point. We may have other ways to check in on that and its use. We haven't quite figured it out, but think that it would be very helpful for us to know exactly how many people are using our particular charging stations. And then we would have something specific to place into the code if the commission is interested in going that direction.
I'm not really that familiar with what one of them looks like, but you said that one charging station, you can charge 8 vehicles at once?
No, not all of them.
Or some.
That would be a lot. Typically, they charge anywhere from 1 to 4. Ours has two plugs. You could charge 2 cars at ours.
Oh, okay, so the machine would be here, but you could use another parking spot and have 2
Yes,
cars?
exactly. Mhm.
Oh, okay.
How well publicized is our charging station?
Well, it's publicized actually in the same places that everybody is. Like I said, there are electric charging station apps, and ours shows up on the app. So any place you Google, where can I find a charging station, it does show up. The surrounding communities, by and large, even if they have the charging station, their policies and their comp plan don't mention them either, and most of the time not even on their website. Now that's one thing we could do is try to market it a little bit better, make it clear that it is available.
Who pays, because I do not know this, who pays for the electricity that's being used to charge?
The city.
I understand there's places that actually charge, and that's what I don't understand, is how they come up with, do they charge per kilowatt hour, do they charge, I do not know. And this got me even more confused reading all this.
Oh, sorry about that.
But because it really didn't tell me, is it, if the city puts it out there, or if we require it for a new project, how do they get their money back, I guess, do they charge, if it's in ABC's parking garage, when they're charging, if I want to pull my car up and charge it, how am I paying for it? Because, I don't think it should be on the back of the city.
Correct.
But I don't know how, you swipe a credit card and they kilowatt hour, I don't know any of that.
Right, well, that's why there's a huge difference in the cost of the machines, because it depends what type you put in, and there are going to be some where you can, you can pay with your card for your time, or by the kilowatt hour. We will have to bring back more detail on exactly what kinds of machines are available in terms of that cost breakdown.
And I know Mr. Boziak, when he was here, he said, well, he read in the Wall Street Journal that hydro cars was the next upcoming thing. And I've looked everywhere, and I can't find anything on that at all.
I had read about that years ago. That hasn't moved very quickly, because one of the ways to produce that is by the use of hydrogen, which is not exactly stable. And the idea is to pull it out of water, and basically are just leaving steam behind. So there was some discussion. It's been probably 10 years since that was first being discussed as a possibility, but there's certainly been no real movement to develop that.
I think this is a good start, but I think we need a lot more information on this.
Do we charge the regular parking rates for that station?
I don't think there's any parking meter there for
There's no
that
meter.
station.
Well, could we have a meter and one that maybe you charged a little bit more to cover the electricity?
We can certainly do that, but it would be, if you deviate from your adopted fee schedule, you'd have one spot in the city that would charge a different rate than all the other spots. So my recommendation, if the board wanted to effectively make sure whomever is occupying that spot, that they pay the actual fee that's associated with anyone else parking in that lot, versus deviating and saying that this particular spot is $5, an hour, and I don't even know how you can program that into the systems that we have in place there. With respect to the electric charging stations, one of the things that is very common, and I haven't seen the units that you actually pay for the ability to charge. It's more so that, manufacturers like Tesla have deployed them strategically to be able to assist their vehicle owners to getting from point A to point B, and some other restaurants have made some investments as well. But in most cases, it's a free service, I think, until they get to the point where they can conceivably recharge a vehicle within 30 seconds or 45 seconds, because to charge a vehicle, you literally sometimes have to sit for 30 minutes to an hour. Even though it's something you have to do, it's not necessarily something that's a major convenience. And so there's still a lot of work in the industry being done, but I haven't found any, to my knowledge, that are effectively charging for that service. Correct.
And when you keep in mind the number of times, for instance, out of the 11 snapshots, ours is only being used twice. In order to charge or have a whole operation for charging, you've got administrative handling and costs that are going to be far greater than anything you're going to get back out of using it for the limited number of hits that each of those machines take.
You also said that there's, I'm reading this, that Florida's coming out with grants. And are we investigating that?
Yes, those grants were, it's our understanding those grants would be based on the Volkswagen settlement. That money has not been distributed to the state yet, but yes, I'm on a mailing list to daily get updates on where they are in that process.
Thank you.
And the electric vehicle market is going to change profoundly, because the Republic of China has actually, to acquire a vehicle there, you have to pay $12,000 to get the license to be able to acquire a vehicle. If it's an electric vehicle, you do not have to pay for that. In addition to, the government is investing heavily into electric vehicles to address their air quality. So you're going to see a lot of other vehicles come on the market that are going to reduce the cost, so it's not something that you're seeing more of your high-end vehicles that are out of regular price points for most individuals. You're going to see a lower, more affordable vehicle being prevalent here in the States probably in the next 3 to 4 years. And then you're probably going to see the situations where the technology on your charging stations gets better, and then you can see a fee for that particular type of service. But most of the electrical vehicle market is booming in the Republic of China at this particular moment.
That's kind of why I asked about this to begin with, because if we start looking at today and tomorrow, we're in trouble. We've got to look at 4, 5, 10 years down the road, and the pollution problems, and everything I'm seeing on television even is more and more companies are going to the electric cars, and we're going to need to have places. If we want people to come here, they're going to have a place to charge their cars.
Well, that's pretty obvious that we are going to have to go forward and think about this a lot more. But as you said, City Manager, and it was in the memo, as time goes on, the costs are going to come down. So I would recommend that we wait 6 months and a year to revisit it, see where the costs are, see what grants are available, and continue to encourage developers to put them in their garages and their developments.
We're going to put one in where you live, maybe.
Are you paying for it?
No.
Oh,
May I make a comment, Mayor?
certainly.
The one that we have now, probably out of, I go by it 4 or 5 times every single day, and have since it was installed in 2012. And I would have to say that out of 365 days a year, there's probably a car sitting in there once a month, not even once a month. And that's normally from January through April, because people have, that card. But I wanted to ask, and it's on this topic, but it's not with regards to this specific item, but is there a possibility that maybe we should take it up at budget time, that particular spot where that electric charging station is, can that be moved, like the fire department or city hall or somewhere where it might, I don't know why it was selected to be put in Johns Pass Park, okay, the actual one station, because it's taking up a parking spot. Yeah. 2 cars can use that one station, but and nobody ever pays for it. You never ever see that someone has paid a parking fee on either one. I've never seen both spots, being used for that purpose. So my question is can it be moved, and who pays to move it? And we can start using that as a $2.50 an hour spot.
If it is the board's desires to relocate that particular device, my recommendation would be is that you purchase a new device and decommission that existing device, because realistically, it's probably at the end of its useful life. It's not reliable. We have some issues with regards to the service of it, and so we've had some conversations with staff about the cost to service it. So in the event that we wanted to find an alternative location, I would certainly say then you decommission that and you move it to another spot that may be more visible or highly desirable or what have you, or you can look at deploying multiple devices, because the cost for those units may have come down since the initial device that we purchased. So we can look into that and see what possibilities are out there.
Any more discussion about the electric charging vehicles? Thank you, Director Portal. Next item. Public comment. Oh, thank you. Floor is now open for public comment on this item. Just, you can pick up the handheld.
Hello? Okay, first of all, I just want to ask at our one...
Please state your name and address.
My name is Lawrence Brand. My address is 508 129th Avenue East.
Thank you.
I own 2 electric vehicles, and I do not own a gasoline vehicle, and I've used our charger here many times. It was mentioned that our one charging station can charge 2 cars. It cannot. It is a single stall with 1 cord. Only 1 car can park there, and only 1 car can charge at a time. I just want to make that clear. If there's another plug, I have not seen it, and I've used it many times. The other thing I wanted to say, it's not utilized a lot. Part of the problem is, as the city manager had said, it has gone into a state of disrepair, and several times it's inoperative and cannot be used. So even the locals that have an electric car that might want to use it while they're at the village can't, because many times it's inoperable and it's an older unit. That's all I wanted to say. We probably should have at least 1 more here in the city. Many electric car charging stations, yes, they are free to charge. Say, for example, Publix and Treasure Island put it in. They pay for the electricity, but they entice customers to shop there because of the charging station. And I myself, a lot of times, go to that Publix because there's a charging station there. Electric cars are becoming more prevalent in our society now, and I think the next 10 years there will be a significant change and an uptick for the emissions problem and carbon emissions. And to get people to come out here, the older cars, or most of the cars on the road, unless you're rich enough to afford a high-end Tesla that has 300-plus mile range, most of the older cars have ranges of in the 50 to 150-mile limit. So anybody coming from Tampa to, say, visit Johns Pass, Madeira Beach, if they have an electric car, they're going to see that on their app that they looked up on their smartphone, and hopefully they'll get to use it if they drive all the way out here, because they might need a little boost to make it all the way back home. If we do add charging stations, even if we do charge for electricity, I think it still would be a benefit for the electric driving public. And most of the charging stations that charge, they charge by the kilowatt hour, and the common rate that I've seen most often is about 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Typically, Duke Energy, as a private customer, I'm paying around 11 or 12 cents a kilowatt hour on my power bill. So I think they're making enough at that rate to pay for any maintenance of the station. I would just request that we do consider at least one more charging station somewhere at the north end of our city, say Archibald Park, at least to entice the electric driving public, to come out to Madeira Beach if they need to charge before they get back home. And even if it's going to be a pay for the electricity by kilowatt hour. Our station here now is free for residents to park in that spot, but a non-resident does have to go to the kiosk and insert a credit card and get the parking pass for that stall. So non-residents do have to pay to use it here, but they are not paying for the electricity. So I just request, that we at least consider one other charging station somewhere in the city, maintain two, for those of us that are driving electric. And I think as we move forward, electric cars will be proliferating. The hydrogen thing, hydrogen is not an energy source. It is merely a storage medium, sort of like an electrolyte acidic battery. Electric cars, the battery is the storage device. The infrastructure, anywhere that's close to a power source, like an electrical outlet box, is a good place to economically install a charging station. If you want to go someplace far away from power, the costs do get very high because then you have to dig a trench to run power conduit all the way out to the station. But anywhere where there's already electrical service is a pretty good spot to start thinking about where to put a charging station. It just makes the job much simpler. Those of us at home, a simple 240-volt dryer outlet is fine for us to plug our cars into in the garage. If somebody wants to add a charging station, if their circuit breaker box is at the far end of the house, well, then they got to run, cable all the way out. The electrician's costs kind of skyrocket. But if your circuit panel is already in the garage, it's a very simple. It's a very simple addition. It's very inexpensive to do. But I just request that we consider at least maintaining the station we have and possibly adding one more. I think we'll make it back up in the future as electric cars proliferate.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Public comment is now closed. Our next item is Gulf Beach's Public Library Audit. Director Pierce.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, for this presentation, I'm going to introduce the Library Director, Vince Gatrix. Gatrix.
Please. Welcome.
This mic's not working. This one? Okay. Thank you. Every year, the library has a financial audit done. This time of year, we send a copy out to each of the 5 cities that financially supports the library. I sent a copy to Walt a couple weeks ago, so I know he's reviewed it. So I just want to stop by today to officially say that the library submitted their last audit. We were pleased with it. I mean, there were no surprises. The library's in financial order, and so that's all that I wanted to say about that, about the budget, or the audit, sorry.
Well, it looks like you're doing really well, making a lot of money, and doing a lot of good things for the community.
We are, and I'd like to thank the mayor. She actually helped us out at our story time that we do down at the Madeira Beach Rec Center. We work with CJ, and we're going, this summer we're going to be going to the rec center every other Friday. And our children's librarian does a story time, and she does a craft, and the mayor was kind enough to join us for a Halloween one, and she came and helped read to the kids and help with the craft, so thank you for that.
That was fun.
And another thing I wanted to say is we had a really great time at the Kite Day a couple weeks ago. I went with Kelly, our children's librarian, and we thought it was a very successful event. We had 40 kids. Kelly did all the work. She's a children's librarian. I was observing. So she was helping the kids with all the crafts and everything. And we had upwards of 80 people, including the parents that came by our table, talking about whether did they know where the library was, and they did. And a lot of the people weren't even from Madeira Beach. That was interesting. You have so many people from Seminole that come to that kite program. It was so successful. And so we really are looking forward to the outreach that we're doing at Madeira Beach. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention is we're really excited about April 17th. We're having our grand opening of our library lending machine in Treasure Island that we got a grant for and we installed down there. It's really exciting. And I have an innovative idea for something I'd like to do in Madeira Beach, possibly. Just like I wrote a grant for that, I'd like to possibly write a grant for what's called intelligent book lockers that could be installed somewhere in Madeira Beach. And the way they work is they're connected to the library system, so if someone puts books on hold, that the books are taken to the lockers. And when they go, they put in a number and they have access to that. And what's nice about it is that people could access that 24 hours a day. So I thought that that's possibly something that could be a nice addition for the residents of Madeira Beach because, as I said last time I was here, most of our use, or the major part of it, is for residents of Madeira Beach. They account for the largest number of card registrations we have. The residents of Madeira Beach check out the most books. So unlike Treasure Island, where we had an issue where a lot of people didn't even know the library existed, the residents of Madeira Beach are using the library, but I thought maybe the library book lockers would be an extension of convenience for them. So that's something that I was going to work on. I look forward to talking to you in the future about it if you're interested. And that's where we're at.
Something to look at, definitely. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do. Vince, on the on page 55 of the reports, the statement of activities, I was just curious. There's a category under that that's called the temporarily restricted net assets. Okay, and I know that that was the Friends donation.
Yes.
You know, the 25.8. But I'm very curious as to why is it called temporarily, and can you get an answer for that from Crawford and Jones, why they tabulated that?
Well, I spoke
Notice
to
the
him
other
about
page, it shows it, but it doesn't really explain it.
It's more in the name. We have, what that means is, as opposed to a permanent one, the permanent, someone donated about $18,000 to from what I understand, years ago to the library. And it wasn't clear what that money was supposed to be for, but it was a permanent, it was a restricted, sorry. It was a restricted, meaning that you're not going to get a lot of interest on it, but technically, like any foundation, if it's restricted, they could only use the money that comes from the interest. The temporary restricted, all that means is that the library has access to it as long as they follow how the people that donated it wanted the money to be used. So like the permanent one, we can't touch it. We can't do anything with it because we don't know what it was used for. We don't know why it was donated to the library. So that's something that we'll have to work on. But that temporary restricted money means that we have access to it. So if we wanted to use it the way the people that donated it wanted us to use it, that we have access to it. And if not, then it just sits there until we use it.
And you said there was like one restriction on it that had to be cleared up or approved before you could use it.
There was, on that particular donation, there was an express way that money should be spent. And when we spend it, it will be spent that way. And until then, it sits.
Okay, and so then Crawford and Jones would either have a copy or whatever, because I know that we discussed this when I was still on the Friends, when it was closed down, and it does specifically state it, and this was done, gosh, I had my name on it, but it was actually prepared by a lawyer that did say the funds are to be used for the purchase of furniture, fixtures, and/or equipment that enhance the library experience for staff and/or patrons. Such as a lunchroom, lounge, or kitchen appliances.
Correct.
So that's why when it said temporarily, I thought, well, what does that mean? And then, like I said, when I went over to the page that kind of described what temporary would discuss, it didn't give this provision, okay? So.
Right, but that provision is how the money will be spent. Until we spend it, as that provision explains, then the money will sit there.
Okay, and is that how Crawford and Jones then explained it to you? Because that's what I really wanted, was from that.
Right.
And then the other thing also, under the increase, decrease in permanently restricted net assets, when I was a trustee on that, on that board, there was almost $400,000, it seems like, so I was just curious as to how that, and it was restricted. I remember the people who made those donations, and I thought that they were permanently restricted. So I'm wondering why it shows zero there. Where was that money moved to?
Well, when I started, it was explained to me that the CDs that we have, that's approximately $400,000, that money is used for, it's going to be earmarked for a building expansion project.
Not the permanently, so where are you saying, but where was the money moved to from it says increase, decrease in permanently restricted net assets, and it shows zero. Okay, so that's why I was curious, why is it, if it's zero now, and there was $400,000 in it, then where did it get moved to on the
It appears like
statements?
it appears it moved into the CD area, and then from my understanding, the CD decreased by 130,000, and according to Vince, 65,000 of that went into operating, which would then become part of the building expansion fund eventually.
I don't understand that.
Well, I'm sorry, could you please tell me what page?
Page 2.
Okay, I'm looking at page 2, we're in 2017.
Okay.
The cash, the certificates of deposit was $560,000.
Right.
2018, it went down to $430,000.
Right.
Which is the 130.
That, half of it went into operating, and the other half went into a dedicated bank account that we call the building account. So when we start, hire an architect to do preliminary drawings, that we would take, we wanted to be able to account for our expenses in the building project in a concise way. So we opened a new bank account with that money so that we could, for the building expansion project.
Okay, and I'm not trying to be real picky, but I am curious, because I know that you had done a great job of giving us this particular report last year, and I'm hoping that you'll do it again. I'll show you what it was. But I am concerned as to, I guess, if it was restricted if it was restricted assets, how could it go into the operating, how could anything go into the operating account? If there was any money under there that was restricted, how could it go into the operating account? Because operating account is a continuing, or did it not go in there?
I wasn't aware that the CD money was restricted. Because I know that they renew it, like it'll be 6-month CD or 12-month CD, and when they mature, then they take it and invest it again. But I wasn't aware that that was restricted.
Okay, well, so we don't go into it anymore today until we get a little bit more answers. Maybe we could just have this conversation with Director Pierce, and just so that I understand where that money is, because I did see it kind of going around, and not being placed, okay, in a column where I can understand where it is, okay? But I would like to say too that Vince, that the report that you provided us in July of 2018 was really a good one, because so many of the important things, like you said, about the participation of Madeira Beach patrons to the library, and how important it is, because we do, our budget includes almost $100,000 for the library. So it's always great to have this report, and I hope that you'll put it on your schedule or on your calendar to provide us this report in July again this year.
Vince, when do you think, hey Vince, when did you say that the budget for the new coming year might be?
Well, what I was going to do, I'm working on the budget now. I wanted to give it to my board at the end of April, and then any tweaking that needs to be done due in May, and then we don't meet in the summer. They generally vote on the budget at the end of May, so that's when it would be complete.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Keep up the good work. Floor is now open for public comment on this item. Floor is closed. Next item is the Seafood Festival Proposed Agreement. City Manager.
Madam Mayor and members of the Board of Commissioners, this item before you this afternoon is to seek direction from the Board of Commissioners how you would like to proceed forward with the 2019 proposed modifications and additions to the Seafood Festival contract. I've had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Flynn to talk about some specifics associated with the proposed agreement. At the February 26th meeting, staff proffered some recommendations for modifications to the agreement and then reached out to Ms. Flynn through the Parks and Recreation Director and resolved the outlying issues that the Board of Commissioners had. For the sake of bringing the public up to speed, there's certain items that I do want to just highlight as part of the proposed additions and modifications is that the City of Madeira Beach will retain the exclusive rights and control over parking and will be the sole concessionaire and will be responsible for the logistics associated with appropriate activities to support the Seafood Festival, exclusively related to parking. The city would also modify its fee ordinance like we talked about earlier to incorporate festival parking. The City of Madeira Beach will not levy any fees associated with direct costs provided that the direct costs do not exceed $8,500. Traditionally, the cost that the Seafood Festival has incurred is about $6,100 of direct cost. Also, I think it's germane to the conversation when you look at the entire city budget and you look at the Seafood Festival and the monies that are collected from that event, it's approximately 0.0342% of the city's annual budget, so which is less than 0%. In addition to when the money is received from the Seafood Festival, the money goes into the general fund reserves, and it is not earmarked for any particular activities or anything like that. So it's not like if we do not collect the $6,200 or $6,500 that the city would have an issue with regards to making payroll, et cetera. The city would not require a deposit from the Johns Pass Village Association, and the city would be listed as a title sponsor and top billing. The city will also be involved in the discussions and conversations associated with marketing collateral, digital media, et cetera. The Johns Pass Village Association will agree to incur the costs associated with law enforcement for the purposes of the event. Staff believes that in the event that we are able to proceed forward with the management of the parking at the Johns Pass Seafood Festival, that we effectively can see ourselves generating a substantial amount of money in the event that we turn over some of the parking spaces at least 2 to 3 times a day. We anticipated that if you took about 25% or 45 spots and did not utilize those and say those were off the table to assist in whatever other capacities those spots need to be used for, theoretically you have 133 spots. If you were able to turn those spots at least twice a day and over the 3-day event, you're looking at about $15,000. If you look at that same number of spots and you transition those spots 3 times a day over a 3-day period, you're looking at $23,000. That's assuming that you charge $20 per vehicle. We've had an opportunity to attach a copy of what the proposed agreement is for consideration, and staff is recommending that we proceed forward with executing a contract for the 2019 Seafood Festival with any direction that the Board of Commissioners chooses to provide to staff. To my knowledge, the Recreation Director has received an application from the event organizer to proceed forward with the event, and we would like to, with the direction of the board, proceed forward with bringing you something at the April 9th meeting for ratification. Staff stands prepared to answer any questions the board may have.
Jonathan, I have a question. The area that we're talking about, the Johns Pass Park, charging $20 to park there, okay? What if residents now show up with the parking passes? Going back to the original conversation
Right.
we had about the parking, and they want to park for free.
Right.
You know, how are we going to handle that?
Well, and that's one of the things that we would speak more specifically in the language that we bring back in the fee ordinance. The analysis that was put in this memorandum was just kind of to provide some thought and some figures as to what conceivably the revenue collection could be on the city's side in the event that we wanted to manage and maintain the parking. One of the things that is a disadvantage for us, and it's been historical, is that every year we have effectively waived the parking. So there is no quantifiable imperial data that I can provide the board that says the value of the parking is X. This would allow for us to understand what the value of the parking is. Because traditionally, like I said, from all the records that we can look back, that this has been something that has been customary, that the fees for parking have been waived. And so when we look at an average, it's hard to really calculate that. And this would provide us the data necessary. And then the board may at a future meeting decide to say, it's not advantageous for us to be in the parking business because there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of liability, there's staff costs associated with it, et cetera. But if we move forward with that, we believe that the opportunity to generate revenue would offset the cost that the city would incur, and in essence, really forge that bond for it to be a genuine partnership with the event organizers, because we are effectively saying, the hard costs, those are hard costs that are already budgeted in your fiscal year 2019 budget. Your budget is not going to get overspent, overrun in any department in the event that you were to waive those hard fees. So we believe that the revenue collection and the opportunity on the parking side will definitely pay for any fees or any charges for services that would be incurred associated with this event.
Did I get lost in that? I think I did.
But basically, it is just a rough estimate. If we decided to say that 15 or 20% of the parking lot would be occupied by residents, we can back that number out and give a ballpark. But I would assume probably some of the residents that are in our community for the Seafood Festival may actually end up walking there and probably would not want to jump in their vehicle, because we all know the traffic that our community experiences during that particular event. So it's really hit or miss. It would be an assumption to understand how many residents would effectively end up driving there for the event. But if we did, even on a conservative number, if we said, okay, if you took off $5,000 off of each of those numbers, you're still looking at one being $10,000 and one being a little over, $18,000, $19,000 in potential revenue collection, depending on how many times we would turn that parking lot around.
Thank you.
Hey, Jonathan, so the number we used last year, that $31,883 for parking that we waived, is kind of a pie-in-the-sky number. It doesn't actually exist, right?
That there's no empirical data that supports that.
Okay, well, I mean, it says, well, there is 16,042 is the average of what we make for the month of October, right?
Sir.
Okay. I think, and I hate saying this, but I think we're complicating this way too much. I think that, and I know John's down there during the event too. John's Pass Park during that event turns into there's buses that are busing people in, and they're turning around in that lot, and they've got to go, and they do kind of a circle through it. So the idea of trying to say that all these spots are going to be available for parking is actually not realistic in my view, because I've seen how they've done that. I know that a lot of the vendors get there early, and they're going to already have their cars parked there, and are we going to tow those cars? And Commissioner Hodges brings up a great point. You're right, there's a lot of people that would avoid driving there unless they thought they could drive there for free and park there for free, so they would probably engage in those spots. So I don't know, for me, it just seems like we're throwing too much minutia into an event that's been running pretty soundly for 37 years. Can we bring Ms. Flynn up for a second? Because Sonny, do you want to talk today, or?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners.
Yeah. Oh, I actually had a couple questions for you. I apologize because I got this last minute because I don't have a working email. But did you ask for individual meetings with the commissioners that were supposed to happen today? Was that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, I'm not blaming anybody, 'cause I must have misunderstood what was told to me. So if you didn't ask for the meetings, who on the board did? Did you ask for them, Jonathan? I don't.
Yes, sir. I asked for individual meetings with the Board of Commissioners with Mrs. Flynn to update them on the Seafood Festival and to talk with them individually if they had any concerns with respect to the item.
Okay. And what was different about what we're talking about today in here? Why would we have individual meetings with her and private meetings?
There's many things that we have individual conversations with Board of Commissioners members before it comes before the board for discussion.
Okay. I'm confused. All right, so we've talked about transparency quite a bit, but I want to go on the record. I don't want any private meetings set up for me unless I've asked for them, because I don't really think that that's giving, we got a little bit of a public trust issue going on right now, and I don't think a series of closed doors meetings and preaching transparency is the exact same thing. And the same thing happened with the marine audit. I mean, there was a 2,000-page report that came out, and there were no questions from the board, so the public was sitting here stunned going, what are we going to do here? So, and I don't mean to bring up something different. I know we'll talk about that at another meeting, but I just want to go on record saying I don't think we should be having private meetings unless there's something private that we needed to talk to the event organizer about. It just doesn't seem transparent to me. It just doesn't, and I don't know how we can spin that any other way. Okay, that's all I really have to say.
Madam Mayor, if I may address that, it's very common, and probably every executive administrator that I've ever worked for, worked under, and seen, it's very common to discuss any agenda items and briefing things with Board of Commissioners and answering any questions that they may have specific to items that are on the agenda. So it has nothing to do with transparency. It's about having conversations with the Board of Commissioners individually, as they are not allowed to have a public session unless it's properly noticed. So there's many times where it's providing additional clarification for board members, but it is not in any way, in any form or fashion, perceived as a lack of transparency.
Well, that didn't make any sense. We are having a discussion right here about all these issues. So why are we leaving? Why are there things that need to be discussed behind closed doors or with individual commissioners? You can talk to us all right now. That's what I'm caught up on. So if I'm wrong, that's fine.
Sonny, I got some questions for you. I had heard that you were looking at moving the Seafood Festival to other places. Even Mr. Andrews and Mr. Kochak both said that in their campaigning, that you were going to move it, You know, if you've got bids from other cities and they're doing better than we are, you should bring that to us and let us at least, see if we can meet it or not. That's number one question, because I don't understand it, because I'd like to see the Seafood Festival stay here. Second question is, which I truly don't understand, I would love for somebody to explain it to me, is the Seafood Festival started as a way to bring people to John's Pass over 30-some years ago, because that was a slow time for the merchants. So if you move it to beach X, Y, or Z, how is that helping the merchants at John's Pass? That's what I do not understand. If you take it and you move it to Treasure Island, how is that helping the merchants at John's Pass? If somebody could explain that to me, I would love to hear it.
Well, first of all, we had offers from other cities. We really don't want to move it. The complication was what we went through last year with the commission. I lost $65,000 in possible grant money because the contract wasn't signed until September. I couldn't apply for relief funding. The difficulty that we had with trying to get the Seafood Festival to even happen last year was a challenge. So other cities did come to us and approach us. Honestly, the merchants of Johns Pass and the Village Association does not want to move it. That's why we're here. That's why we have applied for having the event here, the application went in. We've paid our fees as of March 18th. We want to have it in Johns Pass. Do we want to move it? No, we don't. But we want to work as partners with the city and don't want to fight them. Now, the benefits of moving it to a different city, it would still bring in funding for the association. We'd still raise the money. It would just be fee-free from Treasure Island. They offered us free fees, so the money that we would raise in Treasure Island from the food vendors and the vending would all go back to Johns Pass.
I just didn't see how it helped the other merchants, because how many of the merchants what percentage of the merchants at Johns Pass are members of the Johns Pass Village Association?
I have 69 out of 110.
69, okay. Okay, that was my concern when I kept saying they're going to move it to Treasure Island. I'm saying, how's that helping the merchants? You know, because they work on people walking into the shop and spending their cash in that shop. And if you're over in Treasure Island, or if you're in St. Pete Beach, or you're wherever, they're not going to walk back over here and go, oh, I'm going to go into that shop. And, you know, things were getting very confused. All I was hearing was hearsay. Mr. Andrews and Mr. Kochek saying, they're moving, they're moving, they're moving. They said that about the Old Salt. They said that about the boat parade. You know, I know the city contacted both the Old Salt and the boat parade, and they said, we're not going anywhere. So I was really kind of confused on what was going on, where, you know, where this was all coming from, where it was going to, because we weren't getting any information or good insight as to what was going on at that point.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to add some comments to that, please. Thank you for being here, Sonny. Appreciate it. The last conversations, or just to bring me up to speed too, on February the 21st, and I think the city manager kind of said this, okay, when you were making your comments, we did have a consensus to offer the Seafood Festival, you know, a defined contract, and you had prepared it, and I think there was a conversation while the board was still in session here that I think Mr. Hatch had contacted Sonny by phone, and the agreed to terms were kind of, they were ready to go. It was ready to go with the original agreement that defined the parking, and it defined the waiving of the hard costs. And that was done. And then on March the 1st, Sonny sent a letter, which I feel certainly needs reading in case none of you have ever seen this before, and you might not have. It was from Sonny Flynn, President, Johns Pass Village Association, dated 3/1/2019, and it was on next door Madeira Beach. And it says, on March the 12th, we will elect city commissioners who will conduct the city of Madeira Beach's business and plan for the next several years. First, I urge you to vote on March the 12th and critically evaluate the progress Madeira Beach has not made over the last 3 years. It is with great pleasure and honor that we at Johns Pass Village Association throw our full political support behind Doug Andrews and Steve Kochek as Commissioners District 3 and 4. Both men have proven their loyalty to the community undeniably. Doug is a business owner and the former director of Madeira Beach Recreation. Steve as a longtime resident and commitment to the Madeira Beach 9/11 Memorial, as well as being a former city commissioner. Elections are less than a month away, and you deserve a say in who runs our city. Believe in Steve and dig Doug. In the opinion of the Johns Pass Village Association members, we need these two men voted in to take leadership to the next level, protect our citizens' tourism, and in turn, protect our businesses. As president of the Johns Pass Village Association, I urge you to vote. I'm not taking offense with any of the letter, because it certainly is your letter, but what I am questioning is, the one thing I do take offense about is critically evaluate the progress Madeira Beach has not made over the last 3 years. I just feel that this was a very inappropriate statement, I guess, by any organization that operates within the city of Madeira Beach, as we do want to be partners, okay? But my question to you, I guess, initially is, does this letter represent just your opinion, Sonny, or was it, okay, and y'all had minutes of a meeting and you voted on it at a meeting?
Johns Pass Village Association board meeting.
Okay.
Voted to endorse those candidates, and we have a political right to do
That's fine, and I have no problem with the candidates. I'm not questioning that, but it's just to read the letter in its entirety, okay? So, so you do have minutes of the meeting that show that it's the entire board. Well, like I say, I think the letter was inappropriate, and I think I'm tired of any association holding the city as what I call a hostage in any one of these type of events. And please, I mean, that's just exactly the way I feel about it. I think that I'd consent to the agreement on the table right now with one change. And I think that I want certainly the city to keep that parking, that all of the parking, but I definitely think that Johns Pass Village Association should be prepared to pay the hard costs. I don't think that we should now. I think that it needs to be redone. I think that they need to pay the hard costs if it's $6,500 or whatever it is. And the city will not waive any of the parking or give any of the parking to them. You certainly might wish to continue discussions with other venues. I certainly want to keep the Seafood Festival in Madeira Beach for as long as I live, and I'm sure we will keep it, okay? I'm sure we will keep a fish festival, seafood festival, whatever we want to call it, certainly within our community. I think it's a great part of the community. Where a lot of other communities have failed. I noticed just in the paper last week where the Rib Fest in St. Petersburg is giving up after 30 years because of many concerns that they had, which were some of the same concerns the Seafood Festival had, the going up in prices of sheriff and going up for everything else. But I do think we have an obligation to our city, too, and to our residents and to our other business people in the community. So my deal is to change that agreement once again and request the Seafood Festival to pay the hard costs. And if they want to go to the other cities, then certainly look at them and come back and tell us if we've done something. But we need to do it in a productive way. We need to do it now because it's already the end of March. So we need to, that's all I got to say.
Wow. Wow. That is certainly conduct unbecoming a city official. You just trampled on her constitutional right to support a candidate? I mean, I just heard you, wait a minute, I just heard you read a letter to her stating that you took offense to the fact that she supported other candidates.
City Attorney.
So wait a minute, wait a minute, I'm sorry, excuse me. So if the Teamsters supported another candidate other than Donald Trump, does Donald Trump stop negotiating with the Teamsters? I cannot believe you just said that out loud in a public meeting.
City Attorney, would you please remark on that?
Well, I think that you guys can have a fair debate. It should be controlled, by the chair. I think they're talking about issues that are relevant to the public agenda item. I don't think there's been any constitutional violations, but you can certainly debate the issue about the Seafood Festival.
That's fine.
Thank you.
That's ridiculous, number one. John, on your point, we had a commissioner up here that voted against the Seafood Festival last year. We have certainly not treated any of our events with any respect in the past couple of years. So, there has been questions. I mean, like I said, this event went on for 36 years before we started really butting our nose in last year and making it tough on her. I mean, we had our chief information officer send Sunny put out a press release last year prior to the start of the event, basically threatening to shut it down. So, if we really want to partner with everybody and work with everybody and do the right thing, calling her out on who her organization supported in a local election, which is her constitutional right, that's just, I can't even, I'm sorry. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
That's enough.
Come on, Maggie, really? You can't support
She stated.
I think
She
the
has a right
commissioner
to
is
her
not
opinion.
acting
That's
in
my
a,
opinion, that's ridiculous, and you know
That's
it.
her opinion and your opinion, and I think that's enough.
That's a statement of fact, and it's ridiculous.
That's what she.
Did you have something
I
else to
think
say?
that our commission is not acting in an appropriate manner.
The chair is empowered to run the meeting. If you want to direct motions or rules of order or a point of order, they should go to the chair. You can make a point of order to the chair and raise the issue that you have. And then the chair can rule on it if you'd like.
I just make a point of order that we are, it's a point of order. It's saying that we're discussing this item, this agreement, and for suggestions, opinions, whatever, we are not discussing anything other than the agreement.
Didn't you you brought up the thing. What are you talking about? We're discussing what you brought up.
Today's just a workshop. We're not taking any votes. So there'll be time at public hearings on this, but if there's something you want to add to the agreement or take out of the agreement or express, I think we're not
That's
taking votes on it.
correct, and I said what I'd like
And
to
you can,
take out of the
if you've already
agreement.
expressed your issue on the parking fees, if there's
We're
any
going to
other
move
issues that
on.
can be.
And the only comment I have moving forward is on page 69, number 3, it says the city requests that the Seafood Fest provide a pro forma. It should either say request with an S, this is minor, but we've got to get it right, or requires. What is the board's pleasure there?
I think number 3 should be stricken. I don't think they should have to provide anything to us.
I disagree.
Jonathan, can I ask you a question, please? On the original agreement that we did with Sunny and the association at the Seafood Festival, the hard cost that was brought up, was this something that we were originally going to waive?
For the agreement last year, they incurred the hard costs. For the agreement this year, in the conversations that Ms. Flynn and I, in order to effectively broker an arrangement that both of us thought was palatable, we said, okay, we'll assume the responsibility and the management of the parking side. And in return, we know that there is substantial costs with respect to law enforcement associated with the event, and the hard cost, the $6,500, we've already got that budgeted in our fiscal year 2019 budget. So realistically, I feel comfortable bringing a proposition to the board that effectively waives that. So in the agreement that we're asking for direction from the board today contemplates that it's basically a trade-off that we manage and operate the parking, and in return, we waive the hard costs associated with sanitation, fire service, et cetera. They still have agreed to incur the cost for law enforcement. But what we did is, in our conversation, we wanted to find a situation where both parties get something as part of the deal. Now, would we want more at both parties? Absolutely. But we thought that palatably, that this is something that both of us can sell to our boards, and that's why we came up to the agreement that's before you today.
So the bottom line is that we originally chose to waive the $6,500 for the hard cost, take over the parking, and then, of course, the association was going to pick up the amount needed for the security with the sheriff's department.
And in return, they would elevate our sponsorship level to similar to that of the sponsors that contribute, well over $25,000 to $50,000, depending on the nature of the event. So we would be one of the headline or one of the top billing sponsors.
And as you said a little bit earlier, in fact, about the parking, that this is something new that we're doing. We may not want to do it next year. It may not work out for us to do it.
Yeah.
Sonny, how are you feeling about this with the $6,500 waived for the hard cost? And then, of course, the cost of the sheriff's department is what you decided to pick up and pay. And then us taking over the parking.
Jonathan and I have actually sat down and talked about this. This is definitely doable. I mean, it's appreciated that we're actually working together and that he's communicating with us this year. And I wish the same of the commission to understand what we have to do. Our expenses aren't just the sheriff's department. You know, we have other expenses that are involved. We're willing to give up Johns Pass Park. We're willing to give up 130th in parking so the city can benefit in parking fees. I only want Village Boulevard, the footprints changed. We're only going to 3 days. So there are some things different this year that is not going to cost the city as much. Understandably, there are hard costs on both ends. We want to work this out. The merchants of Johns Pass don't want it to leave. You know, are there other options? Absolutely. But we love our city. You know, our merchants are independent. We count on the advertising money that we raise on this. It's not worth having a festival if we can't have advertising dollars. That generates people all year long. That's what this festival is about, not just bringing people here for that weekend. It's about bringing people here all year long. Filling the parking meters and having parking. I just left. I couldn't meet with you individually because we are having one of the best spring breaks we've had. You know, I can't leave my business for 5 hours to be here, and unfortunately, I would meet with you individually if that's necessary just to get this done. Again, elite funding application open April 15th, or open April 1st, they end April 29th. I need to know and I need to have an answer. That's $65,000 in advertising dollars for Madeira Beach, not just Johns Pass, it's Madeira Beach. These are things that are important to the city.
I feel like there's been a lot of give and take on both sides, and we need to bring this to an end right now. And go ahead and go with this agreement, as we had spoken of, to take over the parking lot. Also to waive the $6,500 fee. And then the association agreed to take care of the sheriff's department. I feel that's fair enough. You've given a lot. You've given probably more than ever, because I know in the past that it's always been a little bit easier to work. But I feel like at this time we need to kind of bring it together. Let's get it done. Let's get the seafood festival started.
Sonny, I just want to thank you for all your hard work. I know it's, you know, a tremendous amount of work. You're doing a great job. And if you're okay with his agreement, I think we can just shake hands, go forward, and be that, you know, city that's 2 miles long and a smile wide.
I do have a couple questions on the contract, the verbiage. The sole proprietorship of the parking and logistics. Okay, so just the understanding, it's Johns Pass Park and 130th, correct? Not the other lots, or because we're working on a contract with Jolly Trolley again for the sponsorship of the buses. So I need to understand what that means.
What we will do is, if there's consensus from the board to move forward with the shell of the document here, you and your counsel with the city attorney and I will work out the nuances of the agreement and then bring it forward. This was just kind of put pen on paper, but we can certainly make some tweaks and modifications because obviously there's some other things that we need to clear up.
Okay, that answers my last question too, because on the bottom of it, it says other event requirements.
Yeah, we'll definitely clean that up. And one of the things I do want to also communicate is the last conversation that Ms. Flynn had with Director Hatch was a concern that the board had about vendors occupying the paid parking space. And she graciously agreed to communicate and has told the vendors that you don't have any parking, and if we want to park them here and shuttle them, or park them at the school and shuttle them, which has been done in the past, that's something that we would accommodate. So that was to allow for the city to maximize the opportunity for revenue generation associated with the parking. So I think it's germane to the conversation. I think it's important to get that on the public record as well, that all the issues that we thought were issues, we worked through those to be able to bring you a contract that it really, both sides stand to gain from it, and work together to really ensure that this event continues to stay here in Madeira Beach.
I have one more question. Okay, and when we go back to the parking thing, wasn't it like 133rd and 134th that you didn't use that, Sonny, before? So those are out of the question.
Right.
So okay.
Right.
The only spots, the only parking that we've used is 130th, right across from Johns Pass. It's right at the entrance to the Johns Pass Village, right where the sign is, right across the street. That's city parking lot. And then Johns Pass Park. The reason we've closed Johns Pass Park to public parking in the past was because it has to be a public drop-off per Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. So your taxis, your buses, so you're going to have a lot of traffic through those lots. If you're willing to take that on, I'm willing to give it to you.
Not really. But is there consensus from the board to proceed forward with the agreement as proffered by staff, working with Ms. Flynn and her counselor with the city attorney?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. We'll bring this back to the board for ratification at the first meeting here in April.
Thank you. Floor is open for public comment on this item. Floor is closed. Next, we have appointing a city representative to serve as a liaison for the city concerning the planning of the 2019 Seafood Festival. City Manager.
Madam Mayor and members of the Board of Commissioners, this item is to seek direction from the board as to how they would like to proceed. In previous conversations, we did discuss about the possibility of a member of the Board of Commissioners serving as the liaison to the Seafood Festival. Since the last conversation, the board had communicated that they would like to see staff serve in that liaison capacity and then inform the board and the city manager and applicable departments on any items associated with the event and keep us attuned of what's going on. So there's a draft resolution that is included in your packet. One of the things that I would have to ask the city attorney to opine on is that by adoption of this resolution and the Board of Commissioners giving a staff person or giving the manager the opportunity to appoint a staff person in that capacity, does that effectively now become a situation where they are a fact-finding member and the meetings have to be publicly noticed for the purposes of conducting public business? Because they've, in essence, abrogated some of their authority to that individual to serve in that capacity.
I'm not sure exactly the intent of what the liaison would be doing, but if the liaison is sitting in the meeting, say with you and me and the Seafood Festival to negotiate terms, I think that that should be a publicly noticed open meeting if you're going to do that. Otherwise, if there's a staff exemption where we as staff can meet with the applicants and work things out and then bring them back to the full commission. But I'd rather not designate a liaison to do any of the substantive work that goes into planning or doing the contract. If a liaison from the commission is someone who would be attending the festival and be there to serve as a ceremonial type appointment, then that's another thing, and that that probably wouldn't require any notice or anything to that effect. But any fact finding that goes on and any winnowing of things down, any discussions about taking things off the table or putting things on the table, those all might need to be done in the sunshine. And even if you're delegating it to one commission, you could get in trouble with that delegation. What they did with the University of Florida, they were picking a president, and they delegated to one person to call the number of applicants, and by doing that, they said that should have been done in the sunshine. So you can do this. You just have to notice the meetings and let the public attend so they can hear what the liaison is saying, to the applicant and to the staff and vice versa.
The intent behind this is to appoint a staff member, and the resolution, if the city clerk, if you can read resolution in its entirety, 2019-05.
If it's a staff member, you're okay.
Okay.
If the resolution 2018-23 says appoint a member of the commission, so that would not be going
Right,
forward.
and that was the older one. We modified it based on the direction provided.
If you're
by
not
the-
taking 2018-23 forward, and you're just taking 2019-05 forward,
which is just
I think that's fine.
a staff person that serves in that capacity, because I did want to make sure that if a staff person is serving in that capacity, if the meetings need to be appropriately publicly noticed, because they are being appointed by effectively the Board of Commissioners to serve as the liaison and assist in providing information and regular reports on the planning process for the Seafood Festival.
Well, I don't think that it's necessary to appoint a liaison from the city commission. I think as a city manager, you can delegate or ask any department head or director to attend and negotiate those for you. I think by appointing a liaison, typically a liaison comes from the board, members themselves. So I don't think that it would be necessary to take this resolution to the public hearing. I don't think we need that.
Okay.
And as you raise the point, it may actually be
2019-05, that would have appointed a staff person. So what we would do, instead of bringing that item to the board, based on the recommendation of the city attorney, I would have the recreation director serve as the staff representative with the Johns Pass Village Merchants Association and be the city liaison through the planning process. And then at regular staff reports, we'll have them report back on the progress, what's going on, some nuances of the event, et cetera.
That's the way it has been in the past, too, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, that falls under his regular responsibilities as the director of special events,
Yeah,
right?
let's
So I
do
don't think
that.
we need anything special to write down for that, no. Okay.
Let's do it that way, and then you don't have to face those other issues also.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Next, well, public comments open and public comments closed. And,
I got some things I'd like to bring up.
okay,
I talked to Mr. Evans about it before in regards to the Schooner Hotel, and that basically, the permit went before the planning commission without all the things that's required in our ordinance. I don't think any permit should go before the planning commission unless it has all 22 items required by the permit. If we want to change the ordinance, then that's fine. But at this point, that's the way the ordinance stands. That's what happened with the town center property that the judge ruled on, said was illegal, but they had already settled because everything wasn't there. I've heard a lot of different things on why, they can't do this because of cost or whatever. Then we need to change the ordinance. The ordinance states, ABC, lists the whole things that must be part of the permit, and it's not. And I think we need to get to the point that we're following the ordinance, period. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Director Portell, if you can speak to Commissioner Douther's comments.
Certainly. In the PD ordinance, it refers back to the site plan portion of the code and states that the site plan shall be completed, a complete site plan shall be turned in. The definitions of the planning requirements for a site plan contained in Division 3 under Plan Requirements state that the site plan submitted shall contain all relevant information that's necessary for the review, and that it'll include, when applicable, the following. Now, the interpretation, according to courts over the years and as is professionally best practice standards, is that relevant and necessary and when applicable are things that have to be interpreted, obviously, and that those interpretations are made by the planning official. Now, what has happened in the past, and I think the city was at some distinct disadvantage during the process for the review of Town Center, for example, because having reviewed those plans, I know that the staff recommendation was very general. It dealt with what was in the plan generally. And in addition to that, the credentials of the people that were involved were not the standard, and they were not the plans, they were not responsible for the administration of the plan and the code on a daily basis, as is your current staff. Finally, quite frankly, your planning staff credentials are better now. And so what would happen is that we interpret this, we list out the things that are relevant and are necessary for the review. Now, in some cases, the things that we have listed, as you've alluded to, it's not just a matter that's not convenient, it's actually not even possible to submit now.
Then we need to change the ordinance.
Exactly.
Then we need to change the ordinance.
At this point in the review, but because they aren't even available, they're not completely relevant or applicable at that level of the review. Now, the rest of this goes on to say that the review responsibility and the authority then is able to decide to either approve with conditions, or deny it. And so what we did was went through the requirements one by one and specified which things were approvable, which were approvable with conditions that the following be done before any permit is issued. We specified very clearly which things had to be in order to ensure that we could meet the standard. Those are all become findings. When it comes to the review point, then it's up to the commission to determine whether what's been recommended by the staff and the planning commission at that point does in fact meet those codes, or if some opposition has come forward with equal or better credentials and can state that those things are in fact neither relevant or adequate to provide the review, and then you specify in your findings why you would be denying those. But this provides us the opportunity to do exactly what we did in this case, was to list everything out and specify line by line which things were approvable at this point and which were approvable with conditions. That's what we brought to you. Now, it's true that our code could be amended to take some of those things out, and we are in the process, as you know, of amending the codes generally. We talked about the PD section and the need to make changes to that. In the meantime, however, to deny all people the right to the process and to the PD, or to the use of their property, is problematic, especially since the code does provide you with the means of doing so. We went through everything in there. There's nothing, some of the things that are conditions here are things like you're supposed to provide how many of something there are now, how many you're proposing, and what is the difference. And they may have provided us with what they're proposing and the difference, and obviously they felt like, well, we could extrapolate from that how many there are, and obviously we can, but each time before any site plan is approved, I make them come back and give me a complete table showing everything. We don't ever sign off on anything until everything is met. And that includes things like DOT and the SWIFT the Water Management District review, which the state law does not allow us to make our decision contingent upon. We aren't allowed to deny a site plan because they haven't provided those final approvals from the state, even though they're in our code. So we provide them at the site plan. Now, the new process we have makes people go through not just the PD, but they're going to have to come back and go through a site plan review to show that they've met all those conditions and everything's signed off. So there's kind of an extra layer of review that we've put in there as well.
You know, and I'm going to use the schooner project. I'm reading Weber, Crab and Weems' letter to you and stuff like that. You know, they put an ordinance in place, so it's like, it's the law. You're supposed to be doing these things. It's not like, well, okay, you didn't give us this, but we can wait for that. That's not what the ordinance says. It says we need to do these things. And when something goes before the Planning Commission and they vote on it, you know, we up here should be accepting their recommendation and not having to go back. But if they're not getting all the information, and then we're not getting all the information, how can we vote on something properly? I just don't know. That's what I'm saying. If you're saying that there's 22 items on the ordinance calls for, but 3 of them, we can't get them right away because we have to wait for ABs. Then we need to redo the ordinance and take those 3 out, or 4, or 1, or 5, or 6, whatever the number is. So when the planning commission is sitting there in a meeting, they're looking at the true facts, and if say there's going to be 18 things, and if 1 is missing, the planning commission should say, no, we don't have number 3, so no, we have to vote no because the ordinance says so. That's what I'm kind of saying. They need to have every piece of information so they can look at it factually, or they shouldn't even be voting on it. It shouldn't even go before them, let alone come before us here.
I understand exactly what your concerns are. The fact that the ordinance specifies that you can approve a condition, or deny implies that there are some portions of it that you could approve that are not adequate at that point, but under certain conditions would become adequate during the process of review. That's standard practice, and quite often in this case, what it is the PD is referencing a site plan requirement, and the site plan requirement usually is brought into effect later in the process. When somebody brings in their site plan, I'm not big on conditional approvals other than to say that we aren't signing off on anything until everything is approved, and that's really what the condition is. These are things that
But then how can they vote on it if they don't have everything in front of them? Where you're saying, well, I'm not going to sign off on it until you get everything in front of us. But when it goes before the planning commission, they don't have everything, so how can they vote on it?
Right, they're not going to have the water management district approval, not going to have FDOT's final approval because they can't have it.
Then we need to redo the ordinance and take those things out of there and put that in separate ordinance. But right now, our ordinance, which is, quote, our law, says you've got to have this before you can move forward.
It
You
does.
can't, Jonathan can't, we can't waive that because that's our ordinance. We need to change the ordinance.
Our ordinance says, if you want to change it, obviously we can change it. The ordinance in the PD says that you have to follow the site plan criteria, and that criteria leaves some opportunity for us to interpret which things in this plan are relevant, which are necessary for the review at this level, and when it's applicable. Those things are all there, and so it provides you with a little bit of flexibility to decide on a case-by-case basis what you need for a particular plan at a particular time. That's because it's a part of a site plan, admittedly, and the PD is cross-referencing a different section. But at the same time, that flexibility is incorporated into the PD review by virtue of the fact it refers specifically to this section. It's something that lawyers have been defending and the courts have upheld in the past. Obviously, we can change the language in the PD section so that it's not making specific references to the site plan, that it has its own list of criteria. As I've told you before, I thought that was more appropriate anyway. PDs honestly shouldn't have this level of detail in them for an exact site plan because you have to go through such an extensive hearing process for that. If you get too detailed and you get on site and you need to make some kind of site plan adjustment, instead of just going back for a site plan review, you have to go all the way back through the hearing process. And it can be really small things depending on how much detail you put in the PD. So it really ties the city's hands up legally, and I've seen these things come back for years as they tried to hammer out the details of a site plan fine grain in the PD process. And that's not to anybody's benefit.
When we voted on the Schooner project to start with, you sat right there and said, this is quasi-judicial. But we don't have everything, so how can it be? I guess I'm really kind of getting lost in this whole thing. If it's a legal thing and it's quasi-judicial, then we should have, if it says 22 things, we should have 22 things sitting here in front of us saying, you've got all 22 and for us to look at. Not 17 or 19 or even 20. We need to have all 22 if it's a legal thing that we're voting on here, because we got to vote yes or no. We don't have the option of sustaining from it, But if we don't have everything, how can we do an intelligent vote, especially if it's quasi-judicial.
It is quasi-judicial by process, definitely. It's not as specific as something as a variance where they have an exact list of things that you have to adhere to, and it's very complex. There's a long list of things you consider, and there are flexibilities in PDs that are kind of flexibilities you don't see in other quasi-judicial proceedings. That's why you get so much input from the public. Before we even get here, we have neighborhood meetings and things like that. There's just a lot more review. There's a lot more detail that goes into PD definitely than into other quasi-judicial actions. It is a complexity, definitely. The need to adhere to a quasi-judicial proceeding, when years ago these were considered legislative decisions. And they've kind of tried to merge the two processes together, and it's an uncomfortable marriage at best.
Well, I just think we need to kind of redo the ordinances.
Definitely.
You know, before we even send it back to the planning commission or to us or whoever. So, you know, we know what we're actually dealing with, you know, the left and right limits. Please. Thank you. One more thing, Madam Mayor. I think we should do away with the civility clause and become like the Parliament in England and Australia. A little fighting up here on the board. I think it'd be good for us.
It'd be more entertaining.
More entertaining.
We'll talk about
And we
that.
can charge a fee to get in for these.
All right, we'll add that to the fee schedule. Anything else anyone would like to discuss?
I would just like to remind everybody that the Trash Pirates are having their cleanup day on April the 6th at Archbald from 8 to 11, and everyone's invited to attend, and I hope to see you there.
Anybody else? Thank you. It's 4:51, and the meeting is adjourned.